Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I want to start a new series. What if Deku had an amphibian girlfriend? Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Sitting on the floor, panting from exhaustion, Midoriya sighed. Cleaning up the trash that All Might left him to do was the first task he had to complete during his training in order to obtain the symbol of peace's quirk, one for all, and he is still at the beach doing it. Even though he has only been working for a few weeks, he still has a lot of cleaning to do. It made Izuku think, oh, man. He got up and walked over to a tire, but he was too tired to lift it. So much to do. But I gotta work harder, train harder, and prove All Might that I'm worthy of his power, he said. When he saw someone coming, he decided not to try again. He grinned and said, it must be All Might. He greeted everyone by saying, all I mean Yagi, in order to keep those around him unaware of his true identity. I'm just about to, he said, but he stopped when he realized it wasn't All Might. It's a teenage girl, most likely his age, with hands in front of her body that are a little larger than his. Her tongue is protruding in a cutesy way. The green, long hair is tied in a bow at the back. She has a bag in her hand as well, and her round eyes are staring directly into his. Izuku said, hi, to greet. His face is flushed and he looks embarrassed as he asks nervously, Circa, can I help you? The first is that he didn't have a shirt on, and the second is that a girl is in front of him. The girl puts a finger to her chin and answers. She greeted him with a cute croak and looked him over before pointing out. Ribbit. Hi there. You're the guy who ran towards that sludge villain on the news, right? Izuku asked, nodding in agreement as she went on. She cocked her head, her gaze making Midoriya tremble, as if she might discover All Might's secret. I couldn't help but notice you're by yourself here with a guy that almost looks like a skeleton. But what exactly are you doing here? She said. As the girl revealed herself, Suyu said, I'm Suyu Asui by the way, but please call me Suyu or Su. Izuku looked at her and smiled as well. He then introduces himself, saying, oh, nice to meet you. I'm Izuku Midoriya, and I'm just here to clean up the junk out of the beach. Volunteered? He said, hoping she would take him seriously. Before speaking, Asui examines him and the debris nearby. She looks back at him and says, that's a lot of work. However, I have to leave. It's good to meet you, Midoriya. She was about to turn when she realized something. Oh, before I leave, here. I thought you might be hungry, especially after all this, she says, grinning as she hands him the bag. Ribbit. Oh, many thanks, I'm going hungry, he said with a smile, taking a look to see what's inside, which made Asui let out a soft giggle seeing how cute he looked. But mostly it was because she was staring at his body, the six-pack he's gaining, making her blush a little. With that she ran off, thinking to herself. No, he's new to you. She then got on her hands and hops away, confusing Midoriya, who shook it off and shouted. Hey wait. What can I do to pay you back? Izuku sighed and peered into the bag, oblivious to the big presence behind him. He hoped she heard him, but she was gone. Young Midoriya, what have you got there? He sighs with relief as Izuku catches him off guard and turns to face the symbol of peace in his muscular form. Oh, All Might. You scared me. Izuku tells him, well. This girl named Suyu came by and gave me this. He displays the bag of food, which coincidentally causes All Might to smile broadly. Oh, you have a fangirl? Izuku blushes as he laughs. A few weeks later Midoriya is still training with All Might, going to school, eating healthily, and so on. However, Asui visited him in the last few weeks, bringing him lunch each time and even getting to know him better. It was kind of her, but Izuku is wondering why she is doing this. They would occasionally chat during his breaks, sitting down by the sand to discuss their academic achievements and their objectives, which were to get into UA High. As of right now, they were having a conversation about their quirks. They have become close friends as a result of their time spent together, making each other happy, especially Izuku, who now has a friend to talk to who also happens to be a girl. Whoa. You're able to scale walls? That's incredible, Asui. That is, Su. Izuku blushed. The said girl put a finger on her chin and giggled. It's okay. You may address me as Asui. She then tilted her head in a cute way and said, yeah, I can climb to any wall as long as there isn't a fire around. But what about you? What is your peculiarity? He was shy and hadn't told her about his quirklessness or even All Might's quirk, one for all, as she sipped her iced tea and looked at Midoriya. Well, my quirk is stockpile. Yes. he shouted, doing a pose, confusing Asui a little. Stockpile? Then she inquires, your quirk accumulates energy over time? Izuku nods, a little uneasy as she places her finger on her chin. Yay. Asui's phone rings before she can finish, and she looks at it and croaks. Ribbit. I'll see you tomorrow, Midoriya. But I have to go now. Suyu gave him a smile before grabbing her bag and leaving. As he stood up and resumed his training, Izuku grinned and said, she really is beautiful. He sighed with relief and watched Asui hop until she was out of his line of sight. He must admit that she is adorable when she ribbits, blushes, or tilts her head. The upcoming months, for some reason, Izuku didn't have enough time to spend with Asui, who was walking towards the beach with Midoriya so they could train together and go to UA for their entrance exam that starts in a few hours. He always claims he's too busy training, but the two have become very close over the past few months, seeing each other at their schools, with Suyu meeting Izuku's mother, Inko, and Izuku meeting Suyu's parents and younger siblings. According to Suyu, she is pleasant. Inko even claimed that she had assumed her son was Asui's girlfriend, but he was so agitated that he had to inform her that they were friends. She genuinely enjoyed the idea of Suyu being his girlfriend, but it wasn't the right moment, and she hopes that the two will eventually get married and start a family, but she is unsure if her son feels the same way. Ribbit. He's my best friend, and Suyu told herself, I shouldn't think about that right now. She was interrupted by someone shouting to another person, eat this. Asui was confused at first before recognizing the voice. All Might? We don't have enough time, you'll be late for the exam. She thought as she made her way to the beach and then hid behind a tree close to the railing's edge while All Might yelled once more. Eat now, consume, eat it. In addition to a heap of the leftover trash and scraps, she sees All Might and Midoriya conversing. Izuku was not wearing a shirt, which makes Suyu blush when she sees his fully grown six-pack. She is captivated by it for a moment before shaking it off. All Might, what are you doing here? Asui thought as she hears their conversation, seeing Izuku take a piece of what looked to be All Might's hair from the hero himself before swallowing it. Good, you swallowed it. You should be ready to take the entrance exam now that you have my quirk, All Might said, glancing down at Midoriya, who had finished eating the hair. All Might chuckles and responds, of course not, it takes about an hour for one for all to kick in. But we don't have time to test it. Izuku mumbled, feeling a little queasy after eating the hair. Okay, but I don't feel anything. You have to leave in. Before he could say anything more. Ribbit? A croak interrupts him. Huh? Izuku gasps as she sees the look of shock on her face as they turn to face the direction of the sound and Asui's head protruding from the tree. Oh no, fearfully, Izuku wondered, how long has she been there? This is terrible. He looks to see All Might sweating, having the same look of fear as well, taking a gulp before speaking. Hello, young one. He said, hey. Izuku. What's going on? I was just telling young Midoriya of. Suyu interrupted him. Ribbit. W1 for all. What did he mean? She asks, staring at him in disbelief. All Might encouraged Izuku to tell Asui the truth about One for All and his quirklessness, but he had no choice but to do so. Midoriya, it's okay to tell her now. He even added, looking worried, there's no point in hiding it from her. Let's just hope she can keep it a secret. Suyu was sitting on the staircase staring at the sand in complete shock when Izuku finished telling her, and he looked down at her nervously, seeing the shocked look on her face, fearing that she might be upset with him for deceiving her. Asui, knowing it was him, she looked up at him sorrowfully as he reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, causing her to jump a little and croak. Why would you lie to me, Izuku? I'm sorry for not telling you about it, Asui said, meeting his eyes. She interrupted him, saying, no. Why would you lie to me about being quirkless? I didn't want you to know because, why? Even after she got up and gave him a hug, he was somewhat taken aback by this. Izuku, you're my best friend. I don't care if you have a quirk or not, I would still be your best friend with or without one. Along with her face nestling into his shirtless body and her gentle cheek grazing his six-pack, Izuku blushes red and gives her a quick hug in return. I'm so sorry for lying to you, Asui, he says. I was just afraid that you might not want to talk to me anymore if you found out about me being quirkless. But now I realized it was stupid of me of trying to hide it from you. She blushes as he pulls her away to meet her eyes, and she thinks to herself, he looks so cute. She hears Midoriya say, he's so adorable. He grinned broadly and got a croak from her before they embraced. From now on, I won't keep secrets from you, that's a promise. Asui said, thank you, first. She then turns to face All Might, who was grinning, and says, I swear I'll keep this a secret. I won't tell anyone. You heard that, right All Might? She receives a nod from the symbol of peace. After noticing the time, he informed the two, I did. Thank you young Asui. The green-haired teenagers broke off their embrace when the teacher said, also, I hate to break the moment, but you two only have 30 minutes left before the exam begins. Izuku put on his shirt and yelled, oh crap, Asui we gotta go. While Asui was getting her bag. After saying, ribbit. Right. Let's go. They left for UA waving goodbye to them. I'm high with All Might. After 15 minutes Izuku and Asui arrived at UA gasping for air. On schedule. Izuku exclaimed, W. We made it, before he gasped for air, and Asui nodded in agreement. She looked at him and smiled, saying, ribbit. Yeah, just in time too. When he did the same, they both blushed and turned their heads away. Let's go inside, Izuku proposed. Asui nodded and they entered the door together. Agree. Asui was perplexed when she turned to see Izuku covering his mouth with his hand. She put a finger on her chin and tilted her head, asking, are you okay? Izuku turned to face her. Huh? He smiles and nods. He whispered, oh, yeah. It's just I swallowed All Might's hair, so that no one else could hear. He sighed and shook his head, saying, but I still don't feel anything yet. Asui makes an effort to comfort him. Maybe it will kick in. Stupid Deku. Cut off, they both turned to see Katsuki Bakugo, a friend from Izuku's youth. Izuku exclaimed, Kachan, as Bakugo gave them his typical irate look. Tsuyu was annoyed by his derogatory moniker, and Izuku gasped in alarm as he threatened, get out of my way now before I set you and Froggy on fire. Izuku nervously said, oh hey, good morning. Let's just do our best out there okay? But Bakugo surprised Izuku by walking by them silently. As he lets out a sigh of relief, Asui places her hand on his shoulder and asks, you okay? He grinned broadly at Sue, who returned the smile with a low laugh. Yeah. Since that sludge villain incident, he's been taking it easy on me. But I'm not defenseless anymore, thanks to All Might, I'm actually going to be a hero, he said. Adorable. She thought to herself as Deku stumbled and fell on his own foot as they were walking to the school. When Asui saw him falling, she was about to use her tongue to catch him, but someone beat her to it. Izuku yelled as a girl with pink pads on the tips of her fingers said, hey, are you okay? With a giggle, the girl helped him stand up using her quirk, which somehow made him weightless. She put her fingers together and smiled while closing her eyes. I stopped you with my quirk, she said. Izuku just looked at her, blushing, and said, I'm sorry I didn't ask first. But I figured you wouldn't mind me catching you. Asui saw his anxious expression as Ochako continued to speak to him, and to be honest, she felt a little depressed by the expression on Midoriya's face, believing he liked the girl. After realizing this, Tsuyu asked herself thoughtfully. She blushed and shook her head, asking, am I jealous? No. No. Why would I be? The fact is that she has been crushing on Deku for some time now, primarily since their first encounter. Tsuyu snapped out of her reverie and turned to face Izuku, noticing his concern. Asui? Asui, she exclaimed. He said to her, hey, are you okay? Before responding, Asui noticed that the girl had left and sighed as he passed him. You've been staring at the floor for a few minutes. Izuku was perplexed by the statement, I'm fine. Let's just go inside. In his mind, he asked himself. He whispers to himself as he rubs his chin with his thumb and finger while staring at the ground and asking, is Asui mad? Was it something I did? I can't really tell if she's really mad or not anything but maybe the way she looks. When he began to mutter uncontrollably, everyone in his vicinity became uneasy. Fortunately, Tsuyu stopped him by yelling as she wrapped her tongue around his body. Let's go. You're making people uncomfortable. Afterwards everyone proceeded to their designated battle centers following UA High's Hero Course exam orientation, where the hero, Present Mike, instructed the class on how to earn points on the entrance exam. Wearing his light green jumpsuit, Izuku is seen in Battle Center B near the bus that brought them there. He is currently searching for Asui but is unable to locate her. Izuku looked at everyone stretching and getting ready for the test and thought, that's strange, I thought we were doing the test together. But she's been really quiet ever since we enter UA. Then he grinned. Wow, everyone is really looking forward to it. Izuku. He let out a sigh of relief as he jumped before recognizing who it was. He turns to her and asks, oh, Asui, where you been? He asked worriedly, and are you sure you alright? You've been awfully quiet ever since we walked into UA. Something wrong? he couldn't help but notice that she had on dark green boots and a yellow t-shirt long enough to cover her black shorts underneath. "Stop staring," Asui commanded, her face flushing. Izuku realized, it's embarrassing. "Ribbit." "Gaw." He squeaked in surprise, looking away as he apologized to her. Sorry, I apologize for that." Suyu wanted to tell him how she feels about him but was afraid he might say no, so she took a deep breath and asked, "Deku." "I?" Asui sighed, realizing that she couldn't hide these feelings any longer, that she was jealous of that girl talking to him earlier, and that she couldn't deny them any longer. "And start," Mike interrupted, and Suyu and Izuku pointed to the big double doors that were starting to open. "What are you all waiting for?" shouted present Mike, who began to gesture for them to run inside. "Go go go. Real battles don't have countdowns." "Oh no!" Midoriya exclaimed, "it's beginning, come on, Asui." He grinned and hurried inside, leaving her standing there. She sighed as she got down on her knees and leapt onto the buildings to find pointers, watching him run inside. Back down below, Izuku is seen searching for any tips to gain points, and he quickly turns to check if Asui is with him, but she isn't. "Asui?" He called for her, looking around. He then started to feel bad, having had left her behind. He was then surprised by someone tapping his shoulder. "Huh? How did you find me?" he asked, turning to see Asui grinning as she stood there. Izuku inquired, feeling both pleased and perplexed. Asui gestures toward the top of the buildings and says, "The roof." Izuku nods and shows him the way to the top of the building so she can speak with him in a more private setting. After Asui and she searched the area for them, they noticed a number of students trying their hardest to remove the robots, and they quickly became concerned. "Deku, I'm not sure we can pull this off." When Suyu heard Bakugo call Izuku that, he told her that it was a way of insulting him. However, after Suyu apologized and told Izuku that the name Deku sounded cute, he told her that it was okay to call him that. Initially, it confused her, but she went along with it and did anything to make him happy. "Ribbit?" Asui asked in a hesitant tone. As they began to look around, Suyu, who had been looking down, brightened when Izuku put a hand on hers and said, "We can do this, and then go to class, together." Izuku grinned at her, making her face flush. From their current location, they could see a number of the students, and the majority of them were doing well, including one with a laser protruding from his belt, another with engines protruding from his calves, and the previous girl who used her quirk to make the robots float before colliding with the solid concrete, which, to be honest, made them uneasy. Suyu asks Izuku, "Are you sure about this?" They kept looking around because it didn't seem like there were any 1, 2, or 3 pointers nearby. Just before they left to look for any, a loud alarm went off, and a few seconds later, the ground shook. "Is that an earthquake?" They looked up as a shadow started to engulf the area around them. "I don't think so," Suyu said to Izuku. The shadow above them turned out to be the zero-pointer rolling toward them, its lower half resembling a tank, smashing small buildings, prop cars, and everyday living objects in its path. Students watched in horror and terror and began to flee, saying, "We must flee." Izuku yelled, but before they could flee, Asui lost her balance and fell off the short building with a faint thud as the sound wave from the zero-pointer's scream blew strong winds in their direction. "Asui!" Izuku's eyes widened, watching as Suyu carefully stood up, checking herself. "I'm okay?" she asked surprised, earning a sigh of relief from the green-haired teen, only for the two to gasp when they saw the zero-pointer approaching their location, mainly Suyu. Seconds after picturing the frog girl being crushed by the soulless machine, Deku instantly ran towards the mech. No. He broke his legs as he leapt up to the zero-pointer while crouching and using one for all. SMMMMMASSSHH. With one for all in his fist, he landed a punch powerful enough to leave a crater-sized dent in the zero-pointer's face. Deku? Asui's eyes were sparkling as he gazed up at Izuku, who was floating in midair as the zero-pointer hit the ground with a trembling thud. Izuku began to fall and screamed in terror as his bones were broken, his arms and legs flapping in the wind. He was bracing himself for the worst and was about to punch the ground to cushion the landing when he felt the wind shift and embrace him warmly. Huh? He looks to see that it was Asui, who used her tongue to blast up and catch him while her arms were wrapped around him and her chest was pressed against his side. "Are you all right, Midoriya?" she asked, landing gingerly on the ground, but noticed, fortunately, Midoriya passed out from the pain. Suyu looked at his broken arm and legs with worry and fear. "One for all, is this dangerous? Why didn't All Might warn us?" she asked herself. Teenagers were congregating around them, and she noticed it. Did anyone notice that? Yes, He defeated the zero-pointer with a single blow? Suyu was upset when one of them said, "Joke's on him for destroying a zero-pointer." Asui started to hear most of them talking about Izuku and how he took down the zero-pointer. She started to say something, but was interrupted by a short woman in her 70s who was dressed as a nurse and had a cane in the shape of a syringe with a ball at the end of the needle. As she approached Asui and the injured Izuku, the woman said, "All right, move aside, give me some room." One of the students exclaimed, "Whoa! Who's the old lady?" He was answered by another. "Are you blind?" When the student was done, the aforementioned heroine asked Suyu, smiling reassuringly, "Are you hurt, dear?" That's the youthful heroine herself. Recovery girl. Asui shook her head and said, "No. No ma'am," looking at Izuku and asking recovery girl, "But please help him, he's in a lot of pain." She gripped his unconscious body close to her and cried a little as she said, "Oh my." Recovery girl expressed sympathy for Izuku before telling Suyu, "Let me take it from her." To everyone's surprise, Izuku's injured limbs began to heal after the nurse puckered her lips and kissed his head. Asui grinned and gave him a hug, saying, "Ah, no worry sweetie, your boyfriend will be just fine." As she goes to check on others, Asui blushes. "Hey, need help?" The girl from earlier is there when she looks up. "My name is Ochako Uraraka." Asui glances at the happy girl and nods. "Yeah. Thank you. I can use my quirk to help him float." "That's if you want." Asui stands up with Ochako making Izuku weightless, holding him up too as they walk off. "Suyu Asui. But call me Su, please." Afterwards exams are over, so Izuku and Suyu had their mother, Inko, pick them up and drive them home after he woke up in the nurse's office from his rest, thanks to the recovery girl. Asui didn't want to go home yet because she was still concerned about what had happened to his body. They're currently in the back of the car, with Asui cuddling up to Deku, who blushes as her soft skin touches his arm. Asui places a finger on her chin and looks at him. "Thanks for saving me, but I'm not sure if I passed or not." He looks out the window. "Ribbit." He looks at her and says, "Even if we don't pass, I'm sure we can find some way to enter UA." She puts her hand over his injured arm and says, "We'll do it together." I didn't get any points either." She smiles a little, and Izuku smiles back a little before giving her a hug. "Thanks, Asui." Suyu, who is surprised, gives her a hug in return. Inko looks in the back and sees them in her mirror, grinning broadly as she drives. Afterwards Asuko was already inside the apartment, so Izuku and Asui stood outside the door grinning. "Thanks again Asui, for..." He started, but Asui interrupted him by gently pushing him against the wall. Izuku's face turned red, and Asui slowly leaned forward and kissed him on the lips. She pulled away, staring at him, while he stared at her in disbelief. Before he placed his hand on her cheek, she confessed, Deku. I love you." Suyu croaked joyfully, "Asui. I love you, T2. Ribbit. Really?" They were so engrossed in their conversation that they failed to notice the door opening and Inko leaving. Midoriya nodded and laughed before kissing Suyu on the lips, who returned the kiss and put her arms around him. When she saw the two kissing, Inko froze and gave a little yelp, frightening the two teenagers. "Izuku honey, would you like to?" They blushed and withdrew. Sorry, Mom," Izuku said, "it's not wa," and apologized. He is interrupted by Inko, who also apologizes. "Oh no, I'll just wait inside, sorry." The two can hear her cheering inside as she shuts the door behind her and dashes back inside, talking to herself about how excited she is to spoil her future grandchildren. "Ribbit," Asui croaked, "sorry. I need to get home." She blushed in embarrassment as she was about to leave, but Izuku stopped her. "Wait, Asui." She looks at him. "I know we only know each other for 10 months now, but..." He asks quickly, "Will you move in with me, please?" He waited for a reply while closing his eyes. With a startled expression on her face, Asui tapped her chin with her finger and thought, moving in with Izuku? Isn't it too soon to ask for this, to move in with someone you've gotten to know for a year? She has to be honest. She loves him with all her heart, they kissed more than once, and hell, they just proclaimed their love for each other. As Izuku opens his eyes in surprise, she says, "Okay Deku. I'll move in with you." Izuku asks her, "Really? Really?" Suyu nods. Riveting. "Will your mother, however, approve of it?" Izuku blushes as she asks, cuddling in his arm and kissing his cheek. "Yes, don't worry, she'll be okay with it," he says, nodding to her. "She's been asking me to tell you to move in with me months ago. A lot," he says, scratching the back of his head. Suyu giggles a little. "All right, but I have to go tell my parents about it. I'll gather my belongings and return here as soon as possible if they say yes. She gives him an embrace and kisses him on the lips, then pulls away, gets down on her hands and knees, and quickly hops away as she leaves. Izuku stands there grinning, and he leans against the wall and sighs, she's so amazing. Then he realizes something. Wait. Oh crap. My action figures. I must conceal them. As he ran inside his house, he thought to himself. After a week, Deku had a strange expression on his face as he stared at his mother's prepared fish dish. He snaps out of it and looks at Asui, who is sitting right next to him. Deku, are you okay? She places a finger on her chin and asks. Since last week, Suyu has been worried about him. They were awaiting the results of their entrance exam, and while she was anxious about her own performance, her boyfriend was her top priority. Before he eats, he answered with a fake smile, why? Yeah, I'm okay. I just spaced out for a minute. Asui looks at him, knowing he's not okay, and his mother Inko looks at him with concern. Afterwards, sitting on the couch, Deku was doing a little workout by raising a dumbbell with his left arm, but his thoughts were still focused on his test results. He was worried that he and Asui might not have passed because they received 0 points and a big fat 0 in the mock battle, and he hasn't been able to contact All Might since the exam. He lets out a sigh as he sees Asui enter his room through the open door, and she approaches him, sits down beside him, and kisses his cheek, saying, Deku. No matter what, we're in this together, okay? You don't have to worry. I guess. But thank you. He smiles and then gives her a cheek kiss as well, which causes Asui, Ribbit, to blush. She quickly got up and left the room to go assist Deku's mother with the dishes. She was wearing a blue t-shirt, a short white skirt, and shoes, and Deku couldn't help but stare at her bare legs. Asui was gorgeous, and his mother was thrilled that she had moved in with him last week. At first, he was apprehensive about having her sleep in his room, but after a few days of cohabitation, he grew accustomed to it and now enjoys it whenever she sleeps in his arms at night. Of course, he allows her privacy to change, because he wants her to feel at home. He lets out another sigh and keeps lifting the dumbbell for a while before noticing his mother smiling as she walks to the front door and says, I know waiting for the results is terrible, but no matter what, I just want you to know I'm proud of you. He sighed again and said, I guess. When his mother left, he saw Asui enter. She sat down beside him and used her tongue to take the dumbbell away from him, leaving him perplexed. Asui, I was training. He turned to face her and pointed to the dumbbell. I understand, but for the last 5 days you've been training and grieving excessively. Izuku yells, his face flushed and anxious, as he can almost see her underwear beneath her skirt. BB, but Asui W. What about my mom? She says, blushing slightly, plus I want to help you relax a little. She gives him a sweet smile before slowly sitting on his lap, facing him. She could walk in at any minute and her face was inches from his. Don't worry, my cute Deku, Asui assures him. She won't. She left to the grocery store. We have about 30 minutes to ourselves. She then pulls away, smiling at him. Asui interrupts him by kissing him slowly. With a nervous laugh, Izuku said, oh. Okay. I guess I could use some relaxation. She smiles, and he slowly begins to smile back while holding her hips. She said, Ribbit. They both leaned in for another kiss, but the front door opened quickly, causing them to pull away and flush. They turned to face Inko, who was crawling quickly toward them while holding mail in one hand. Izuku? Asui? Both of you received a letter. It's your test results from UA. Deku and Asui gasp in surprise as she hands them their mail while sitting on her knees with a nervous expression. In the Deku, Asui room, Asui can see the fear in his eyes, knowing that he was worried about the outcome of his actions. The two of them are sitting at the table together, staring at the mail that is in front of them. Deku. Remember. No matter what happens, we're in this together, she said, grabbing his attention as he looked at her. Izuku nods and smiles back at her as she says, Ribbit. Izuku kisses her on the cheek and says, I know, thanks Asui. Suyu blushes and opens the mail, tearing it in two as a hollow disc lands on the desk and quickly turning on to reveal All Might himself. Good evening, Asui and young Deku. After a brief pause, he said, I know you might be wondering what your final results are. Even though you two had 0 points on the Villian score, I might add that you both saved each other with a great deal of heart. Your hidden rescue points have been reached by us, the teachers. He displays their scores, and to their astonishment, Izuku and Suyu placed second and third in the mock battle, tied with Bakugo at 68 points. Welcome to UA, future heroes. All Might concluded, his arm extended toward them. The two were taken aback, and they held hands tightly before grinning and embracing each other in a passionate embrace. Asui, we made it! We made it! It's unbelievable! Deku exclaimed joyfully, ribbit ribbit. She remarked as Deku got to his feet, lifted Asui up bride style, and spun her around joyfully. After a few seconds, they stopped when Izuku looked down and saw that Asui was blushing, her face red, and she was staring at him in embarrassment. Sorry, Izuku apologized, setting Suyu down as she glanced at him. Ribbit, it's alright Deku. She smirked at him, and Deku reciprocated by holding him close. Just as they were about to kiss, Deku's phone rang, cutting them off. Izuku gasped as he looked at his phone as he took it out of his pocket. All Might sent it. He reads the text and says, he said to meet him at the beach. He looks perplexed and raises his eyebrows, which makes Asui sigh with sadness because she was looking forward to their time together. However, since Deku possesses the power of the symbol of peace, it was crucial to see All Might. Okay. Let's go get change. Suyu said to Izuku, grinning, and he nodded, grinning back. He eventually contacted him once more the evening after they opened the UA acceptance letter. All Might was staring at the beach's shoreline when Deku and Asui ran toward it. He saw them approaching and waved, and Izuku yelled as they reached up to him. Hello everyone. MIMMPH. With her hand over his mouth, Asui interrupts him just in time, whispering, Deku, be careful. You were about to blow his cover. Look. Deku's eyes widened, and he nodded as Asui released him. She gestures to the people who were at the docks, gazing at the glistening ocean. Thank you so much, young Asui. Asui blushed slightly as All Might grinned at them and said, thank you. Ribbit. She held Deku's hand and said, you're welcome. The hero then raised both of his hands and gave them a high five. Congrats on getting I. Deku yelled in surprise as Asui interrupted him by punching him in the stomach, causing him to groan in agony. Asui. Why in the world did you do that? As she calmed down, he asked while holding her shoulder. Why didn't you tell Deku that your quirk would hurt him? Looking at him, she asks, why would she ask the symbol of peace that? Deku was perplexed and uneasy. He gives them a thumbs up and smiles. That really hurt kid, ow. But well, we were in a time crunch. But it turned out all right, plus now he knows what he's dealing with. All Might holds his injured stomach and coughs a little before responding to her. Deku. I don't want to see you hurt, Asui says, placing a finger on her cheek while glancing at him before turning to face her boyfriend. What if you get hurt again, and if it's something bad that can't be healed? He asks her. She started crying, and Izuku looked at her in disbelief because he could see the worry in her eyes. She had been worried about him ever since he broke all his bones in front of her the first time he used One for All. He sighs and turns to face All Might, saying to him. I truly want to put in a lot of training to master One for All, Asui. I want to be the world's greatest hero, like All Might, even though I know it's risky. He was interrupted by Asui, who began to embrace him while sobbing on his chest. Ever since I was a kid. I always dreamed of becoming a hero, eh? He yelled, believing he had said something incorrectly, as he held Asui tightly. I sincerely apologize. She looks up at him and says, I didn't mean to upset you. She then slowly presses her finger to his lips to silence him. No. I just need you to swear to me that you won't get hurt again because that day you were hurt, worried and scared me. Promise me, please. Deku glances at her and All Might, who nods and flashes his almost famous smile, which makes Izuku smile. Asui asked in tears. I swear. I'll work hard to control One for All, so don't worry, Asui. Happy. All Might picks up 2 cans from the sandy floor as he transforms into his buff figure, Izuku said, turning to face Asui, who smiled as she slowly kissed him on the lips and he kissed her back. You can command it once you figure out how to control it, he said, smiling. Crush the cans as they pulled away, looking at him smiling while the 2 couple notice him. Hey, it's All Might. The man shouted, causing his girlfriend to shout. No way. How come he's here? A bead of sweat appears on All Might's head as he gasps, all right. Let's run now. While they were listening to the hero, Deku and Asui ran or hopped after him while yelling. All right. Ribbit. A few days later, Deku was in his room at midnight, lying in his bed with Asui in his arms. He was wide awake, unable to sleep because school starts in a few days, and Izuku was worried that he might not learn One for All in time because he could only use a small percentage of his power. Using 100% would break his bones again, but using a smaller percentage would cause severe bruises. He sighed, but he felt Asui sleeping, holding his body to hers while cuddling. Knowing that she is a heavy sleeper due to the low outside temperature, as a result of her quirk, which is that she is part frog. Izuku grinned at this. He sighed and carefully slipped out of his bed and out of her arms so as not to wake her. After he was free, he covered her body with the bedsheets to keep her warm, kissed her head, and quietly left his room, shutting the door behind him. Half an hour later, Asui moans, opens her eyes slowly, and yawns. She quickly realizes that Deku isn't beside her and appears perplexed that he isn't in his room or bed. "Ribbit," she started. "Deku?" Exhausted, she whispered as she slowly rose from the bed. She wanted to get her boyfriend back in bed with her, but she wanted to make sure he was okay, so she walked over to the door while trying to stay awake. As she left the room, she saw that the lights were on in the living room, and as she walked over, she saw Izuku on the couch watching videos of All Might using his quirk on his phone. However, she didn't notice Asui at all until she broke the silence. Deku? Why are you up at this hour?" The boy looks at her and yells, "Asui!" He tells her, I couldn't sleep but you shouldn't be up." He is worried and says, "You should be sleeping." Asui approaches him and sits on his lap, yawning and snuggling close to him. "But I know something's wrong." She tilts her head and says, "I'll sleep if you come back to bed." "What's bothering you?" Deku looks at her and then sighs, looking at his hand sorrowfully. "It's just, ever since I used my quirk for the first time, it broke my bones. I'm just worried that I won't be able to master it, plus I'm afraid I might fail at UA." She asks, anxiously, letting out another yawn. He was crying and his voice was sad, but he turned to face her when he felt Asui's hand on his cheek. "Honey," Suyu started, "you'll learn to control the power of All Might." When she's done, she slowly kisses him on the lips, making Izuku smile as he gives her a kiss in return, holding her close. "It will take some time to get used to, but don't be afraid," she assures him. "We'll figure it out together." Soon after, he feels Asui pull away from him and fall asleep in his arms. Deku smiled, knowing that she was going to bed, and got up with her in his arms. He then walked back to his room and got into bed, putting a blanket around Suyu to keep her warm, kissing her head, and telling Asui before he fell asleep. "Good night, Asui." Early in the morning Deku yawned and slowly sat up in bed. Rubbing his eyes, he glances at his room's clock and sees that it is 6 o'clock, hours before their first day at UA, when it was time to get up and eat breakfast. Elevated. Izuku yawns once more before getting out of bed and making his way to the restroom in his room. After opening the door and entering, he froze and gasped in surprise, his face flushed. He can see Asui in the shower from where he is standing, hot water streaming down her bare body through the glass shower door. It was not long before she noticed him. "Ribbit!" she exclaimed, startled. "Deku?" He closed the door and turned his back to it as the red on his face brightened after she called his name. He yells, "Sorry," to her one last time before running back to his room to wait for her to finish. Sorry. I'll come back after you're done," he says. Asui was back in the bathroom, her finger grazing her cheek, and she was also flushed bright red. Suyu thinks to herself, he looked so cute when he blushed. As she looks down at her nude body, she thinks to herself, but he saw me nude. She thinks to herself, it's my fault for not locking the door, and keeps taking a shower. An hour later Deku and Asui were seated at the dining table in the kitchen, sharing breakfast with Inko. They both blushed intensely and avoided making eye contact. Izuku's mother became perplexed as a result of the question marks that appeared above her head. As she went on, they turned to face her and asked, are you two okay?" With little concern in her voice, she said, "You've been looking away from each other when you sat down. Did you two had a fight?" Which made the two of them gasp. Izuku shook his head and waved his hands, saying, "What?" After accidentally walking in on Asui, he stopped and was unable to explain what had happened. No, Mom, it's not like that. The thing is, well." Fortunately, Suyu intervened and informed Izuku's mother. She clarified, "Deku and I are just anxious about our first day at UA." Her smile caused Inko to sigh with relief. "We're super shy, that's all. Ribbit." Happily, she started, "Oh, then that's a relief." She grinned as she got up and carried her empty plate to the kitchen sink, leaving them alone at the table. "Now, finish up so you two can get to school," she said. Deku notices that Asui has a finger on her cheek and is staring directly into his eyes. He yells as he looks at her. He was anxious because he thought she would scream at him, but then he felt her lips on his cheek. She was kissing him, and when she stopped, he looked at her in confusion. He exclaimed in surprise, "Why, you're not mad? Aren't you going to yell?" Suyu gave him another cheek kiss while grinning. She rests her head on his chest and cuddles up to him, saying, I'm not angry, Deku. Plus, it's my fault for not locking the door. Izuku held her close while grinning. Then, tilting her head slightly, she asked him, "But did you like what you saw?" Izuku asks, blushing a beet red as he yells and turns to face her in surprise. He gives her frank answers. "Well. Yes." Her face flushed. "You look hot in the shower." He turns his head away from her after he's done. But she forced him to turn around, and he quickly saw that her face was flushed. She gives him a passionate, passive kiss on the lips before he can respond. Izuku began kissing her back while holding him close. As Izuku got to her feet, she put her legs around Suyu, who groaned during their kiss. He took her to his room and began to walk. As they continue their makeout, he gently places Asui on their shared bed. Deku soon feels Asui's long tongue slowly encircling his as she plays with it. He smiles as they share a kiss, but Asui halts and pulls him away, both of them gasping with intense blush. Suyu blushed and said, Ribbit. Wait Deku, we can't. Izuku was perplexed. He asks, are you okay? He looks at the clock on the stand as she interrupts, if we're moving too fast then I'm sore. When Izuku realized there was still an hour until school started, he yelled, oh crap! He exclaimed. His girlfriend nodded and they stood up to get ready. We gotta get ready, she said. While Izuku remained in his room to change into his uniform, Suyu took her uniform clothes out of the closet and left the room to change in the bathroom for privacy. Soon clad in his UA, Deku stood at the front door. Uniform, preparing Asui's and his bags, and placing her books in her bag. He doesn't have to, she would say, but since it's his lover, he doesn't mind. Grinning, he stood up and placed his backpack on his back while he waited for her. He quickly realizes that she hasn't finished, which perplexes him. He was going to go check on her when he noticed the bathroom door open, thinking, maybe she's nervous. He gasps when he sees Suyu in the UA as she leaves the room, smiling at him. Consistent. She asks, well, how I look? Asui was dressed in a gray jacket with blue-green stripes, a red tie, and a long-sleeved, button-up white shirt. The girl wore a dark blue-green skirt that showed off her slick, attractive legs, while Deku wore dark blue-green pants. Izuku simply stood and gazed at her. He stammered a little and blushed red again. He smiles and Suyu exclaims, Ribbit, while blushing. Why you look so beautiful? After glancing at his attire, she joyfully tells him, well, you look nice too. They approached each other after praising him. Suyu put her hands on Izuku's back and he put his on his hips. They heard Inko call them just as they were ready to kiss. When she arrived, she smiled and said, are you kids ready for your first day? You two should get going or you'll be late. The two drew away, blushing in embarrassment. Izuku holds her hand and says, right, let's go Asui. She blushes again, but she smiles, nods, and grabs her bag. As they prepared to depart, Inko summoned her son. Wait Izuku. They exclaimed as they turned to face her and noticed a smile. The question, aren't you taking your action figures of All Might? Caused Izuku's face to flush red with shame. He yelled, Mom, as Suyu laughed and wondered to herself, adorable. A few minutes later now, the two were going to UA High together, walking down the street. Asui was absorbed in her thoughts and unable to pay attention to what Deku was saying, so he called her name when he noticed that she had a finger on her chin and was staring up at the sky. Asui, he yelled, attracting her attention the second time he called her name. Ribbit? She asks, observing his anxious expression. As she looked at him, he asked, are you okay? Is something wrong? In response, she takes his arm and pulls him along with her into an alleyway while making sure no one else is around. She looks at the perplexed Izuku. She shook her head and blushed, saying, Deku, I don't think we shouldn't show to anyone at school that we're a couple. What? Izuku inquired, becoming even more perplexed. He asks, why? Is something wrong? As he slowly lowers himself to her height and holds her cheek in his hand while she cuddles up to him. She told him, nothing's wrong, honey. It's just, what if the teachers don't allow students to date in school? What if they separate us into different classes if they found out we're together? She said with sorrow, shocking Deku. Before long, he places his hand on his chin. He began, Asui, you might have a point there. Asui stared at him. He began to mutter as he usually does, but I don't think they would do that since it's UA, and it's known for being one of the best. He yelled and waved his hands when she said, you're creeping me out, stop it. With a sorrowful sigh, he said, sorry about that. Asui might have a point regarding UA might forbid students from dating one another. Asui noticed this when she kissed him slowly on the lips. He was surprised when he kissed her back gently, and they withdrew while maintaining eye contact. Deku, it's okay, she assured him. It's only during school days, all we have to do is act like we're just friends, best friends. She continued. He nodded and smiled as she put a finger to her cheek and explained, oh, and you have to call me Suyu. She interrupted him. Okay, sounds like a plan, Asui. Then Izuku blushes deeply in embarrassment and yells, I told you to call me Suyu. Sorry. Suyu giggles as he apologizes. He laughed and nodded when Asui said, it's okay, but here, we have to go separate ways. I'll go ahead so I can be there first before you come in, okay? He smiles at her as they share another kiss before he pulls away, saying, sure Suyu, sounds like I plan. Suyu paused just before exiting the alley and glanced at Izuku, who arched a brow. Huh. Suyu informs him. Izuku was perplexed when she raised a finger and said, oh, one other thing. Then she grabbed the hem of her skirt and pulled it up. Izuku yelled at this, his face flushed. Asui grinned at him, her white underwear now visible to him, encircling her pelvis with her inner thighs and waist. Before leaving, she gives him a wink and lets her skirt drop back into place. Deku was stunned as he stood there. Izuku thought, she showed me her undies. He cheered and shouted joyfully in his mind, she showed me her undies. My girlfriend showed me her undies. Asui hears him outside the alley, and she smiles and blushes as she keeps walking. Afterwards Deku hurried to the hero school, UA, just minutes after emerging from the alleyway. Hi. He waited outside for a few minutes for Asui to arrive before rushing inside. However, his phone rang after the mid-run in the hallway. Izuku paused, took his phone out of his pocket, and looked at it, realizing that Asui had sent him a confusing text. He muttered to himself, Asui, why would she text me right now? The last part worried him, so he opened his message box, looked at it, and yelled as red flushed his cheeks. Wait, is she alright? She's not in UA, he thought. The 4 pictures Suyu sent him, some of which featured her body in various positions, were what caused him to behave in this way. Izuku glances at the first picture and checks to make sure no one else is present. He was perplexed before realizing it was his girlfriend, dressed in a green suit of some sort, with gloves and goggles on her head. He grinned at this. Looking at the second picture, he thought, well, whatever she was wearing it sure looks hot on her. This one now highlighted the curves of her lower body by showcasing her hips and legs in her green suit, causing Izuku to smile even more, but he almost passed out at the sight of the third picture. Suyu was exposing her legs in the third picture, letting him see the outline of her pussy through the tight suit. Izuku was breathing heavily because he could see them through her suit. Calm down, he said as he began to ease his breathing. He looked at the final picture and thought, I know she's making fun of me, but when did she have the time to take these? I never saw her take photos at home. With his blush showing more, he covered his eyes and yelled at this one. With his face still flushed, Izuku put his phone away after seeing the final picture of Asui topless and flaunting her breasts and nipples. He smiles and lets out a sigh. As he continued looking for his classroom, 1A, he thought, I should talk to her about it, she sure likes teasing me, huh? It didn't take him long to recognize the room he needed to go to. 1A. 1A. Where's 1A? Oh, found it. In addition, it doesn't take long to realize how big the door was. He thought to himself, whoa. After glancing to his left and right, he exhales deeply and asks, this is huge. Are there giants that attend here? The most promising students are behind this door, preparing themselves as the next generation of heroes. The idea of Kachan being here quickly came to him, startling him a little before he calmed down. He smiles as he opens the door and says, maybe we're in different classes. But at least Asui is in here. He gasps when he sees Bakugo responding to a man wearing glasses who is making chopping motions with his arms. He was instructed by the student to remove his feet from the desk because it was considered rude to those who had previously occupied it. Deku saw Asui sitting in the right line, behind a pink girl with horns and black and yellow eyes, and thought, just my luck. When Asui saw Izuku, he smiled and gave him a covert kiss without anyone else noticing. Izuku was about to enter when the man in the glasses started talking, and a smile appeared on his face. Everyone turned to look at Izuku, who greeted them tremblingly. It's him. Hi. That said, the spectacled student strode over to him. It was, hello, he said. I am Tenya Iida. Izuku interrupts, grinning warmly. That's okay, I know. Tenya Iida, the student, pauses as Izuku goes on. His smile is nervous because all eyes are on him now. I'm Izuku Midoriya. It's super nice to meet you. When Suyu saw how bashful her boyfriend was, she laughed. Looking at the entrance, Asui saw Izuku begin speaking to someone who claimed to remember him. She quickly realized it was Ochako Uraraka. Hey, I remember that green hair. It's you? Said a happy voice. Suyu is a little envious of Deku's red face when she greets Uraraka from where she is sitting, but she knows she shouldn't because she knows Deku wouldn't like other girls. She calms herself by observing Izuku enter the fourth-line seats, which are at the very end and were occupied by Momo Yaoyorozu, the student with the spiky ponytail. Izuku looked at his girlfriend and began to smile as soon as he sat down. Mina Ishido, the pink girl, saw her smile back and get to her feet. She smiled and asked Asui, "Hey, where are you going?" "Oh," replies Suyu. She wants to call him Midoriya because she doesn't want anyone to know her boyfriend's nickname, which Kachan gave him when he used to bully him. "I'm going to sit with my best friend, Midoriya." Glancing back, she sees Bakugo scowling at Deku, making her angry because she wants him to stop bothering Deku. Mina suddenly let out a gasp. The pink girl smiles as Suyu nods and asks, "Wait. You know him?" She started to say, "That's so sweet, but was interrupted by the voice of a weary adult. Everyone gasps when they realize it's their teacher, who is strangely on the floor in a yellow sleeping bag. "If you're here just to make friends, you can pack up your stuff now." He held a juice pouch to his lips and drank it, saying, "Welcome to the Heroes course." Suyu approaches and sits next to her boyfriend as he gets up to explain what they'll be doing. "Asui," Deku whispered, and Suyu looked at him and replied, "Ribbit. I told you to call me Suyu when we're in school." But he forgot, so he blushed. He nods, and she says, "All right. Sorry, but I wanted to ask." Suyu blushed and giggled as he whispered to her, "Where did you get the costume?" "The one in the photos you sent me. And when did you even take them?" Then she said something. She tells him, "Oh, you saw it? Good. Well, when I got here, I snuck into the girls' locker room to put on my hero costume and wanted to tease you." He interrupted her. Incredulous, he muttered, How did you get your hero costume so early?" Suyu turns away from him and blushes, saying, "Ribbit." With a shy expression, she whispers back to him, "Well, I asked All Might for it before he puts it away with the rest." "Ribbit. I just wanted to tease you to help you relax." Deku gives her a smile and places a hand on her shoulder, causing her to turn to face him as he tells her, "Thank you." She gives one back as well. She opened her mouth to say something, but Mr. Aizawa interrupted, taking a blue jumpsuit out of his sleeping bag. Everyone was perplexed, but they listened and took the jumpsuits they were given to their locker rooms. "Okay, put these on and meet me outside." Beyond the school, after hearing what Mr. Aizawa had to say, every member of Class 1A was taken aback. "What, a quirk assessment test?" Ochako interrupts after the yell. She noted, "But the orientation. We're gonna miss it, since most schools require students to introduce themselves to the class as a whole." Mr. Aizawa spoke after giving her a weary look. As Deku felt someone other than himself, all of the students gasped, "If you really want to make the big leagues, you can't waste time on pointless ceremonies." He asks, noticing Asui smiling back at him. He returned the smile as Aizawa went on. He was given a worried gasp when he said, "Here at UA we are not tethered to traditions. That means that I get to run my class however I see fit." Asui slowly takes her boyfriend's hand and captures his interest while he's still talking. Seeing the anxious look on his face, she said, "Midoriya? Are you okay?" He tells her while sadly glancing at his hand and then at her. His eyes were filled with fear as he concluded, "I can only use a certain percentage of my power. I don't have any control over it yet." Asui touched her cheek with a finger. Izuku's shoulder was touched by her. "Hey, don't be scared," she said. She asked, "You'll learn how to control one for all, no matter what. Okay." And then, without anyone noticing, she kissed his cheek to reassure him. Izuku grinned and rubbed her head, blushing and croaking quietly. Izuku looks at her and says, "Ribbit." "Suyu." Aizawa interrupted him. With a serious tone, he said, "Asui, Midoriya. Pay attention." They blushed and pulled away. Ochako became suspicious when he saw how close they were standing while everyone was staring at them. I wonder," she asked herself inquisitively. Aizawa then asks. With his arms crossed, Bakugo responds, "Bakugo, how far can you throw a ball?" He can throw 18 meters before catching a softball that their teacher has thrown to him. Then Aizawa gestures toward the surrounding circle. Bakugo smiled menacingly as he said, "Try throwing it, this time using your quirk." He walked to the circle, aimed at the sky, and threw the softball while screaming and exploding. Die! The ball then shot off into the distance, shocking his classmates and leaving Deku stunned. As Aizawa glanced at the phone in his hand and then showed everyone the screen, he thought, whoa. Bakugo had thrown the softball more than 700 meters, causing everyone to gasp. With Mina cheering, the yellow-haired student Kaminari exclaimed, "Whoa, 700 meters? That's crazy." As everyone was discussing their quirk and the assessment test. After hearing this, Aizawa grinned and said, "This looks like it's going to be fun." Everyone fell silent, with some people appearing perplexed. "So, this looks like fun, huh? You have 3 years here to become a hero. You think this going to be all fun and games?" Deku heard someone panting and turned to see Asui with her tongue out as Aizawa explained what they would be doing and what would happen to them if they didn't use their quirks. He asks her in concern. Since Asui's quirk is that of a frog, Izuku is well aware that the animal in question typically requires water to stay hydrated. "As I mean, Suyu, are you okay?" she tells him while grinning at him. As they looked back, Deku smiled at her and said, "I'm okay, don't worry." They did this just in time to hear their teacher instruct everyone to prove to him that their presence was not an accident. The 50-meter dash was the first test. Asui and Iida went up first. It turned out to be Deku when Suyu felt a hand on her shoulder before making her way to the front of the line. Asui blushed and said, "Ribbit." He then gave her a reassuring smile and nodded before approaching Iida. "Good luck, you'll do great." The machine that reads their time spoke when they were in position. "Runners are your mark. Ready." Bang! The two either began to run or hop at the sound of the gunshot. Asui's frog quirk helped her finish second in just 5 seconds, while Iida's engine quirk helped him take first place in just 3 seconds. When she was done, she got up and looked at Deku, who gave her a thumbs up, which made her feel better. Ochako saw this as Asui smiled at him. She began to have more questions as a result of the blushing and smiling. With the intention of asking Asui later to be certain, she pondered, "I know they're best friends, but could they be more than that?" Half an hour later, Asui was standing there, panting, under the shade of a tree. She needed water because she was hot and had a dry throat, but there was nothing to drink. She was momentarily perplexed when a cold water bottle suddenly materialized in front of her face, and then she noticed a hand holding it. When she looks up, she sees that Izuku is the one offering her the drink. She blushes and he smiles at her, saying, "Here, Asui. I got it for you." She gasped as she said, "I told you to call me." But Deku interrupted her. She grinned and accepted the bottle, quickly rehydrating herself by saying, "I know, but no one's near so they can't hear us." Deku laughed a little when he saw how adorable she was. When she was done, Suyu looked up at him with a smile and a sigh of comfort. She tilts her head and asks, "Thanks, Deku, but where did you get the water?" before turning to face the other people who were panting and worn out from the tests they took. Gazing up at the sky, Deku laughed uneasily. Well, I asked Aizawa if I could use the restroom, but I lied, so I snuck in the locker room and got my water bottle from my bag. He clarified it for her. He grinned, but he saw that she was staring at him with a finger on her cheek, which made him a little anxious that he had done something wrong. "I knew you needed water, so I brought some with me just in case." He said he was sorry. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't." He was interrupted by Asui, who pulled him behind the tree so that no one could see him and pinned him to it before kissing him on the lips. He gave a little startled yelp and then kissed her back, slowly holding her hips close to him while they did so. But Ochako, who went to see how they were doing, gasped while behind the tree, fortunately out of earshot. When she saw them making out, she turned red. She smiled and thought, "Oh, they're together." Before he could even get a glimpse of Asui and Deku, she turned around and saw Aizawa about to turn to face them. She shouted just in time. He looks at her and says, "Mr. Aizawa, I have a few questions," to get her attention. Ochako then began questioning him about UA, saying, "No need to yell, Uraraka." "What is it?" attempting to divert his attention so that Asui could spend some time with Deku. As the couple resumed their kissing, Deku carefully slipped his hands into Asui's blue jumpsuit pants and unzipped her pants. When it was down, he gently lowered her pants to her ankles, revealing her white underwear and sleek legs. "Ribbit!" Suyu croaked in surprise as she realized what was happening and her face flushed. She quickly broke off their kiss, leaving Deku perplexed. He asked, "Is something wrong?" and saw that she was blushing. He looked down and yelled, realizing what he had done. When he says, Oh, Asui, I'm so sore. She shushed him and put her hand over his mouth. Shush. Deku, don't yell, everyone might hear. She tells him, then sticks her head out to check if anyone heard them. Fortunately, nobody did, and everyone was still taking a break while Ochako spoke to me, Aizawa. She lets go of Deku's mouth and sighs with relief. Her gaze returns to him. We should probably head back to the others, she says. Deku blushed and nodded, saying, this is too dangerous for us to do in school. Ribbit. I know, he said tremblingly and apologized. He looks away from her, blushing, and Asui quickly holds his cheeks to force him to look into her eyes. I'm sorry, Asui, I just couldn't control myself. I mean, you're so cute and beautiful. I love you so much. With her head cocked to the side, she smiles at him and says, I love you too, Deku. As they slowly kissed, Izuku grinned and said, my cute Deku. Ribbit. Asui told her boyfriend after glancing at the others as they withdrew. Deku nodded and said to his girlfriend, we should go back to the others. Right? He then saw that Asui was going to pull her pants back up, but he intervened. Izuku blushed as he said, no, allow me. Asui was momentarily confused until Izuku dropped to his knees, causing her to gasp. Ribbit? Her boyfriend asked, turning to face her undies so he could see them as well as her long, smooth legs. Red-faced, he gently rubbed her legs with his right hand, making Asui pant heavily and blush. She briefly stuck her head out again to make sure no one was approaching, allowing Izuku to touch her for a little while. Then, as Izuku stopped, Suyu croaked and moaned as Deku gave her a few light kisses on her inner thighs and hips near the undergarment. Suyu shakes a little and groans just from the sensation of his nose gently pressing against her pussy lips as he leans forward and gets a good look at them with his face inches from the white undies. After removing his grip, Izuku pondered. At that moment, Asui placed her big hands in front of her pelvis and said, they smell so nice. Izuku looks up in confusion to see her face even more flushed. When Suyu said, stop staring at them, when Deku realized what he was doing, he yelled, it's embarrassing. He then carefully zips her pants back up before getting to his feet. Before she embraced him and pressed her body against him, he looked away and said, there, all done. Sorry. She looks up at Izuku and smiles, taking one from him before they kiss and then pulling away after a few seconds. No, it's okay, but thank you for the water. And for being here for me. As Suyu nods, Izuku turns to face the class and says, you're welcome, now let's head back to the others. After saying, Ribbit, I'll go first. Asui exits the tree and returns to the group. When she returned, she saw that Ochako was asking Aizawa questions, one of which she skipped because their teacher sighed. Given that he appears to be about to nod off, he continued, okay, enough, we're running out of time. For now, save all questions after the test. Or when I'm awake. Ochako saw Asui sighing with relief as he was leaving. Ochako grinned and came over, waving a hand as Suyu made his way back to the classroom. Asui looks at her and croaks a smile, saying, hi, Suyu. After saying hello to one another, they struck up a conversation. Hi, Ochako. But it wasn't long before they heard Izuku called out by their homeroom teacher. Mr. Aizawa said, Midoriya, you're up. He then threw the ball to Deku, causing Asui to gasp because she knew that Deku still hadn't perfected one for all. Izuku sighs and looks at the ball fearfully when he is inside the painted ring on the floor. He was totally unaware that All Might was standing behind a huge board, watching him from a distance, and he thought to himself, there's no choice, I have to use it. But it'll break my bones. Suyu expressed concern that Izuku might fail the quirk assessment test because he did not use his quirk during each one. Oh, no. Deku. He said. Asui saw that Deku was going to use his quirk to throw the ball and gasped as Bakugo tried to scold him, telling Iida and the others that he was a quirkless loser. She yelled, Midoriya stop. But gasped in shock when Izuku threw the ball for just 45 meters, leaving her and everyone else perplexed. Deku looks at his hand and asks, huh? Mr. Aizawa abruptly addressed him, asking, I could have sworn I was using my quirk. What happened? Izuku looked at the teacher and was taken aback to see his long hair and gray scarf floating around him, as well as his eyes glowing a red color inside the irises. I erased your quirk. When Deku saw the teacher's expression, he gasped. The seriousness in his tone left Deku feeling both confused and anxious. The judges for this exam were not rational enough. Someone like you should never be allowed to enroll at this school. Izuku looked closely and was shocked to see a pair of yellow goggles around Aizawa's neck. You erased my quirk? He asked. He concluded by saying, ah? Those goggles. I know you. You can look at someone and cancel out their quirk. The eraser hero. Eraserhead. Which prompted people to start chatting. Asui croaks with a finger on her cheek. Honta Siro, the student with the tape quirk, asks, Eraserhead. Who's that? As their homeroom teacher continued to speak with Izuku, she and the others remarked, Eraserhead? I think I've heard of him before. You're not ready. You don't have control over your quirk. Aizawa asks, and Deku gasps in surprise. When Tsuyu heard Eraserhead asking her boyfriend, were you planning to break your bones again? Counting on someone else to save your useless body in the line of heroes? She narrowed her eyes and became somewhat irate. Ochako placed a hand on her shoulder after noticing this expression. She worriedly tried to reassure her friend, but it wasn't working, saying, Calm down Tsuyu, I'm sure he doesn't mean it. Aizawa interrupted Izuku by wrapping his scarf around him, drawing him close and staring him in the eyes, causing Asui to gasp. No, that's not what I was trying to do. She started to shout, Izuku, at their teacher, but Ochako stopped her and restrained her. Finally calm, Asui sighed and watched as Aizawa finished telling Izuku that he reminded him of someone, that being All Might, whom he glared at without the others noticing. Don't, it'll only make the situation worse. Then Aizawa turns back to face Izuku. Asui looks at her boyfriend with concern, while Izuku looks at him in shock and the others gasp. Even with that drive, you're worthless if you can only throw a single punch before breaking down. I'm sorry Midoriya, but with your power, there's no way you can become a hero. At that moment, Aizawa released his scarf. He told him, I returned your quirk, as he made his way back to his starting position, after saying, take your final throw. Everyone turns to face Izuku. While Kachan was speaking, Iida thought aloud, I wonder if our teacher gave him some advice. As Izuku gazed at the ball in his hand, oblivious to Asui approaching him, she perplexed her classmates, including Aizawa, by saying, probably told him to start packing. Asui, she said as she went on, before he could inquire what she was doing. Mr. Aizawa sighed and said, I'm just going to give Midoriya some advice before he throws. He looks at his phone as Tsuyu gets to Deku and says, fine. But hurry up, we don't have all day. Izuku turned to face her as a result, and she could see the fear in his eyes. Then, whispering to him, she holds his arm gently. Deku, it's okay. Remember that we're in this together, Izuku said, becoming a little more animated. A microwave with an egg inside of it appeared in their minds as they asked themselves, remember the example you told All Might and what he said back? As he recalls it, Izuku smiled slowly. Picture an egg in the microwave, and make sure it doesn't explode. Looking into Tsuyu's large, stunning eyes, Izuku said, why yes, back at the beach. She blushed and croaked, ribbit. Then there's no need to be scared Deku, before he interrupted. He reflects on the entrance exam and looks at the ball with sadness, saying, I can't Asui. It's just I'll end up breaking my arm and I don't want to make you worry if I get hurt or expelled. After using One for All, the bones in his right arm and legs broke, causing Asui to cry and fear death. That was not something he wanted to happen again. Deku, began Tsuyu said, capturing his focus. I know that I get worried, and scared to see your body broken but I believe in you. She smiles. So don't worry, I'll support you all the way, just remember the egg in the microwave not blowing up. Izuku smiled at this, a few tears streaming down his cheeks. He was overjoyed that his girlfriend would always be there for him. She whispered, try to focus your power at the tip of your finger. Then, without anyone noticing, she licked his cheek with her long tongue, causing him to yell and turn completely red. Asui repeated the final words Tsuyu had spoken to him as he walked back to the group, leaving him stunned. Then he looks at his hand and asks, at the tip of your finger? He grinned and asked himself, the fingertip? Asui. You're a genius. He then looked gravely and positioned himself. After a moment, he inhaled deeply and prepared to throw, which alarmed his teacher and classmates and even caused All Might to gasp. As he watched Midoriya toss the ball while yelling, he asked himself in disbelief, hey, is he for real? SMMMASSHH. Using One for All at his fingertips, he launched the ball high into the air, shocking everyone, including Asui, who hasn't yet grown accustomed to his power but was alarmed. She was now examining his fractured finger. She was concerned about the amount of pain her boyfriend was likely experiencing at the moment, even though it's only a finger and can be healed. Mr. Aizawa glanced at his phone and saw that it read 750 meters. All that force just in one fingertip? He asked himself, but Izuku quickly interrupted him. Mr. Aizawa. The teacher says, observing Izuku as he makes a fist with his broken and bruised finger while grinning in agony. Aizawa grinned broadly and remarked, "This kid." He was impressed by what Izuku had demonstrated. "You see? I'm still standing," Deku said, maintaining his smile and determined expression. Ochako said, "He threw it over 700 meters. That's crazy." Kaminari yelled in surprise. Iida looked at Izuku and exclaimed, "Nice, he's finally showing us his true power." As she raised her arms. As Yuga adds, Asui approaches Izuku after hearing. His finger appears to be broken now. It wasn't much of a pretty throw. Deku saw her approaching and grinned. As she looked at his hand and then held it in hers while examining his broken finger, he said, "As I mean. Suyu, hey." He laughs nervously as she asks, "Does it hurt?" With a worried expression in her eyes. Suyu smiled when he said, "Why yeah, but it doesn't hurt that bad, I'll be okay, honest." They heard a familiar yell, but she was unable to kiss him for it because everyone was staring at him. "Hey." The two turned to see Bakugo rushing angrily in their direction. Asui was about to enter a fighting stance to defend Deku when he grabbed her and pushed her behind him, shocking her as he assumed a fighting stance. "Deku, you bastard. Tell me how you did that or you're dead." Asui gasped at this. Suyu blushed a little when he glared at Kachan, preparing to attack and defend her, but Mr. Aizawa stepped in. Suyu couldn't believe Deku was willing to do so. Everyone gasps in surprise as Bakugo tries to escape but is unable to do so after Aizawa wraps the scarf around his neck. "What? Why the hell is your damn scarf so strong?" he cried out, struggling to look at the teacher who had just spoken. As he asks Bakugo to step aside, Deku has an opportunity to get away with Asui, holding her hand as he guides her away from Bakugo and back to the others. It's an indestructible cloth made of carbon fibers and special lined alloy, perfect for capturing villains or students trying to hurt others. As he approaches the two anxiously, Ochako asks, "Oh, my, does it hurt?" Izuku lets out a sigh and then smiles. He yelled, "Not much, but I'm okay as Asui pulled him away from Ochako and the group. The girl in question was perplexed when she saw Aizawa release Kachan before yelling for the next person to step up and toss the softball. Returning to the two, Asui led Deku behind the trees they had previously been at. "Asui?" Izuku asked, appearing a little alarmed. To his surprise, Suyu holds his hand and slowly kisses his broken finger while shaking her head and asking, "Is something wrong?" He let out a yelp at this, and his cheeks flushed once more. Although it didn't hurt, the kiss on his broken finger felt good. As she withdrew and looked up at him, Izuku grinned and sighed in relief. He grinned and knelt down to her level, kissing his cheek and making her croak with a flush. "Asui. That felt so nice. Thank you." She grinned and continued, hugging him with her head on his chest. "Why? You're welcome, but I should be thanking you," she said. "For protecting me against Bakugo. I was surprised since I was going to protect you, but you protected me. Thank you, Ribbit." Before telling her, Suyu closes her eyes and embraces Izuku, who gives her a hug and kisses the top of her head, mainly her hair. He holds her while they both enjoy the embrace of his arms. "You're welcome, Asui. I won't let anyone harm you, I promise you." Afterwards they hugged before returning to their other fitness tests, where Deku had to contend with the pain of his injured finger. Now that the test was over, he started to lie down on the floor and pant. As they walked over to the others, Mr. Aizawa gave the results and helped the exhausted man off the floor. Before hitting a button on the phone, he said, "Okay, time to give you your final test results. I rank you best to worst. You should probably have a good idea of your standing already." Deku sighs and shakes slightly, closing his eyes in terror, saying, "I'll pull up the whole list, it's not worth going over each individual score." He thought, the person ranked last is going to be expelled. As he examined his broken finger, he quickly looked back up to see Asui's big hand on his, indicating that everything would be alright. As their homeroom teacher displayed the chart of their results, he grinned and nodded. Everybody was checking the score to see what they received. Asui did the same and saw that she had placed 13th, which made her smile and put a finger to her cheek. However, as she checked for Deku's name, her smile faded as she moved from 16th to 20th place, which shocked her and caused her to croak because that's where Izuku's name is. And no, she thought, and she turned to face Deku, who was staring at the ground with a sad expression on her face. Suyu was about to say something to Aizawa when she glanced at him, but he spoke before her. "Also, I was lying, no one's going home." Aizawa grinned as everyone fell silent and then gasped in surprise. With the exception of Todoroki, who remained silent, and Yaoyorozu, who expressed surprise that no one had discovered the lie and apologized for not informing them, everyone yelled when he said, That was just a rational deception to make sure to give it your all in the test. As that was happening, Deku felt a hug and noticed that Asui was the one staring up at him. Deku smiled when Asui whispered sweetly, "Ribbit, Deku, you're staying." They soon realized that everyone was watching, so they pulled away from one another and blushed slightly. Mr. Aizawa said, "Midoriya," grabbing Izuku's attention while handing him a note. "Take this and go have the nurse fix you up." Izuku grinned as he accepted the note. With a sigh, the teacher said, "Thanks, Mr. Aizawa. Next time don't lie to me if you were getting water for Asui, just ask next time." Gah! Suyu grinned and giggled as she thought to herself as Izuku's face flushed with shame and he let out a startled yelp. Adorable. A few hours later when school let out, Asui waited outside the doorway for her boyfriend, who was waiting on Recovery Girl to fix his finger. She is waiting when she hears a call. "Hey, Asui!" she exclaims as she sees Ochako and Iida coming toward her. Iida bowed as she said, "Oh, hey guys. Also, call me Sue." Ochako nods as he says, "My apologies, Sue. But have you seen Midoriya?" Before continuing, she inquired, "Yeah, how's he doing with the broken finger?" With Asui placing a finger on the side of her chin, Ochako grinned and said, "Oh, and we were hoping if we can walk with you guys after school." Suyu responds to them. The lie that Ochako used to justify staying confused Iida, who was only grinning. "He's with Recovery Girl fixing his finger, but we're not really heading home. Me and Midoriya have to stay to meet up with Mr. Aizawa. He said he needed to talk to us about what we did wrong with the fitness test." Uraraka was aware that Asui desired privacy with her boyfriend. Ochako interrupted Iida, saying, "Huh? That doesn't sound right, there has to be a reason to." She turns to Tenya and says, "It's okay, Suyu. We'll see you tomorrow." She exclaims, "Come on Iida," and drags Iida along with her as he tries to inform Asui that he will see her and Izuku tomorrow as well. Suyu exhaled with relief as they departed. She simply had something planned for Deku once his finger was fixed. She wasn't irritated or anything. She saw Deku leave with a weary expression on his face as the door opened. "Ribbit!" croaked Asui. "Deku, are you okay?" she asked anxiously as she walked up to him, supporting him with his arm around her shoulder. He started, "I'm just so tired," after saying, "Recovery Girl's heel took a lot of energy from my body." Suyu grinned and looked around to make sure that every student had left. Confusing him, she assists him in returning to the school after realizing everything is clear. "Hey Asui? Where we going? Did you forget something?" he said, his voice a little worn out. They arrived at a classroom quickly, and Asui responded to him. "Yeah. I just need to get something." Izuku, who still finds her giggling cute, became even more perplexed when she croaked with a giggle. Then he saw that they were walking into Class 1B, which was empty. Izuku questioned, Asui, what's going on?" as Asui escorted him to the teacher's table. Then, holding him carefully, she planted a soft kiss on his lips. Naturally, Deku was taken aback at first but returned the kiss. Asui grinned and started to move toward the door after they withdrew. As she flushed, Izuku, who was perplexed, thought to himself, "Well, I've been thinking. Since we're together and, well, I think I'm ready for our first time." When he realized what she was referring to, his eyes widened and he almost yelled, "First time." Aware of the situation, he inquired. He started to say, Asui, why you mean?" but stopped when he noticed Suyu locking the classroom door. She turned to face him and slowly unbuttoned her uniform jacket, letting it fall to the ground. She blushed as she showed off her white short-sleeved shirt that embraced her figure and her red tie. "Deku. I want to make love to you." "Ribbit." She approaches him, holds his uniform jacket in her hands, and smiles at him, turning him beet red. She tells Deku, "It's okay, nobody's going to come in. Everyone is out of school. I asked All Might, so we're okay." Izuku smiled slowly in return, lifting his hands and clinging to her hips. Suyu croaked with delight, "Oh okay Asui, then I'm ready to make love to you too." Deku then kissed her on the lips, causing her to return the kiss while locking her thighs with his waist. The two departed UA after taking a brief nap, putting on their trashed clothes again, and Suyu handing Izuku her underwear, and headed back home together. Asui is holding Izuku's arm in the opposite direction while resting her head on his shoulder. "That was amazing Deku." She taps her cheek with her finger to give him a quick smile, which causes him to return the favor. Since Izuku placed 20th and believed he was expelled, they were so happy with their first time together that they didn't want to discuss how their first day went. Fortunately, the teacher advised them to give the test their best effort. As Suyu watches him get down on his knees to get to her height, Izuku paused and said, "It was amazing. In fact, it made me feel so happy." As he started to rummage through his backpack, Asui became intrigued. She asks, "What are you looking for?" As he takes out a small note and hands it to her, leaving her perplexed. He blushed slightly as Sue took it and opened it to read it as it reads, "I made this note months ago before we got together weeks ago. I wanted to give you this. You have the most beautiful eyes and your beautiful green hair, Asui. Will you be my girlfriend?" She reads, blushing. "Asui, the day I first met you. I I was so nervous and shy to tell you. But after a couple of weeks of being friends and then best friends, I started to fall in love with you." Asui smiles and lowers the paper, saying, "Ah, Deku, that's so sweet. But remember, we're already a couple?" As he finished, Asui gave him a hug and a kiss on the lips. "I know. I planned on giving it to you on the day of our entrance exam, but since that didn't happen, I wanted to show you now how I felt. But I was too shy and scared," Izuku said, blushing. They both began to laugh a little, and she croaked, "Thank you, Deku, and yes, I'll be your girlfriend, even if I'm already your girlfriend." Then, a gust of wind blew at them, causing Izuku to gasp and hold Suyu's skirt in place while she waited for the wind to stop. "Thank you." She blushed because she hadn't worn any underwear since she had given them to Deku to keep, and Izuku nodded and grinned. He said, "Welcome. Let's head home," adding, "Mom's probably making dinner early for us." Asui nodded, and they walked hand in hand home. Suyu was in the shower, which was odd for Izuku because she had been in the shower for at least an hour, but it was likely because her body needs water because of her quirk. Later that day, after Deku and Asui had their first sexual encounter, it was nighttime, and they were back at home in the apartment. With a sigh, Midoriya hummed, "I just hope she's okay." He glanced at his clock, which indicated that it was 9 p.m., and asked himself, should I go check on her? It must have been too hot outside for Asui during the quirk assessment test earlier today. Izuku asked himself if he wanted to respect his girlfriend's privacy even though he was certain they made love and he had already seen her nude. Izuku made a joyful gesture, thinking over and over how wonderful it felt to be with her for the first time, and then he screamed, "Wait, have we ever gone out together?" He covered his mouth when he realized he was screaming, but fortunately no one heard. He was thinking about whether or not they had gone on a date, and when he quickly realized they hadn't, he sighed in disappointment. "Oh no." He grimaced and said, "How so stupid of me. All that worrying if I passed the entrance exam that I never asked her out." He felt terrible about not asking her out, so he turned his chair, looked at the TV on the table, and considered what he could do for her. He soon smiled broadly, and then he got up, ran out of the room, and went into the kitchen to begin preparing something. Afterwards, after taking a shower that lasted almost 2 hours, Asui left the bathroom feeling satisfied. Ribbit. Wearing a blue shirt and a short white skirt, she thought to herself, "I needed all that water after all that training." She went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and took out a strawberry milk box. She closed the door and drank the milk, then turned to find her boyfriend gone from the living room. Deku seemed to be studying, right? Confused, she asked herself, or perhaps he went to his room and dozed off. After all, he's probably exhausted from that fitness test and thinking of the sex she had with Izuku hours earlier, she blushed a little and then shook it off. She entered his bedroom and found him sitting on the bed, staring up at her as she entered. She was perplexed. "Deku? I assumed you were asleep. Are you okay?" She taps her cheek and sat next to him, sipping her strawberry milk. He looked at her with a smile. "Yeah." He stood up and walked to the TV, causing Asui to croak, saying, Well, I felt bad for not asking you out." "You want to ask me out?" She tilts her head confused, taking notice of him turning on the TV and putting in a movie. He then picks up a bowl and shows it to her, earning a gasp from Suyu. She noticed that the bowl was full of jello, her favorite snack. "Asui?" Midoriya smiled and said, "Will you join me in watching a movie? As the evening of our date?" This caused her to flush pinkish red. "Oh Deku," she says, embracing him and kissing his cheek. "Of course I will." Sue's smile vanished when she saw Izuku's smile turn to a look of regret for not asking her sooner. Suyu grabs his attention by holding his hand with hers and says, "Hey, Deku." He looks at her and says, "There's no need to worry. I'm not angry or anything about not getting asked out sooner, so it's okay." Suyu said, "Now let's enjoy our movie night." Izuku nodded, "Right." He went to turn off the lights, and when he turned around, he gave a startled yelp. Suyu pulled her white skirt down her ankles and kicked it away, exposing her smooth round hips and white undies. Asui kissed him on the lips. returning his smile as he held her cheek with his hand, causing her to cuddle him in a cute way, making him laugh a little. Oh. He turns around with a red face, thinking she was changing. Sorry, Asui, Deku. I should have given you some privacy, I'll go and... She puts her hand on his shoulder as he continued to face away. Deku. Ribbit. He turned to face her, his face still the same color, and he found it very attractive to see Suyu only wearing her shirt and underwear with her legs out. Asui reminds them of what they did back in UA. Deku, you're my boyfriend, she says, so it's okay for you to see me like this, plus you already saw me naked. So, I'll be sleeping nude with you sometimes. Please calm down, she says, placing her other hand on his shoulder. Plus, you'll be naked with me too, so it's okay. Ribbit. She then gives him a kiss, which makes him relax and return the favor. After finishing, they grinned and withdrew, gasping for breath and staring into each other's eyes. Okay. Izuku says to her, I'm sorry about that. Asui laughed and he laughed nervously, saying, it's just. I was afraid you weren't comfortable. Adorable. Placing a finger to her cheek, she pondered. Afterwards, now in bed, Suyu was still in her shirt and underwear, eating some of her favorite jello, and occasionally offering some to her boyfriend, who accepts and thinks it's cute when she eats them. The movie they're watching at the moment is an action romance about two heroes who team up to fight those who oppose them, falling in love in the process. When the scene where they're going to kiss comes up, the two turn to face each other, with Sue's tongue protruding slightly. My dear, you're really gorgeous, I'll keep you safe until the very end. Claimed the male hero in the movie to the female hero in his arms. Watching this, Izuku slowly wraps his arm around Suyu's back and other behind her head, holding it, feeling so much of her hair green hair. Asui blushed a little from him bringing her close. Ah, I love you so much. Before she and her lover shared a kiss, the woman in the film said, please. Kiss me. Off-screen, Deku and Sue were also sharing a kiss. Izuku helped Suyu lay on her back on the bed after they had pulled away from their kiss. She smiled and croaked, but he stopped her before she could pull his boxers down, saying, wait, confusing her, he whispered. Mom might hear us. Sue smiled and he blushed, adding, then we'll be as quiet as possible, my cute Deku. She giggled, which made him smile, and he said, okay. Following that response, Asui took off his boxers while carefully taking off her adorable underwear. The two then made love for a second time that day while croaking and moaning could be heard coming from their bedroom. Later that evening. Wow. Izuku sat up, breathing heavily, perspiring, and looking around next to the bed he was on. He had been having nightmares lately about losing Asui, but he shook the feeling off and tried to forget about it. He looked at his side and saw that Suyu wasn't in bed, and he raised an eyebrow when he looked at the clock and saw that it was 3 in the morning. What? Izuku thought. She must be in the bathroom. He got out of bed, put on his boxers and pants, and was going to go check on her when he stepped on something soft. He looked down and saw her undies on the floor, grinned, and picked them up before inhaling their fruity scent. He folds it precisely, slips it into his wallet-like pocket, and leaves his room, saying, so nice. Smells exactly like grape. He then moves to the bathroom and knocks softly enough to avoid waking his mother. Asui? Are you inside? He waited for a response and soon heard a croak, indicating that Asui was okay. Why yeah. She then said, come in, Deku. He smiled and entered, realizing she wasn't using the restroom, but he yelled when he saw her naked in the bathtub with the water over her neck. Sorry. Asui blushed and turned away. Asui, confused, he inquired, are you okay? Have you become dehydrated again? He was a little alarmed by this, so he knelt down and gently rubbed her cheek with his hand, causing her to croak. Yeah. She says, nestling into his hand and holding it on hers. I'm not used to using my quirk yet, so my family always has an indoor pool for us to swim whenever our bodies need it. Midoriya nods, understanding her as she places a finger on her cheek. Although I understand now, why didn't you wake me up? Suyu blushed slightly and said, I could have joined you, but I didn't want to wake you because... Ribbit, surprised, she croaked, what? She asked, wondering if he said what she think he said. Izuku answers by standing up with a grin, pulling down his pants and boxers to expose his member in front of Sue. Ribbit. When he got into the tub with his girlfriend and sat down, holding her close while feeling the warm water, a flush came over her face. After she pulled away, Izuku told her, Asui, I don't care how late it is. He shook his head, saying, I'll always be with you to support you, just the way you supported me when we first met. Deku honey, it's okay, you should get to bed and... She was interrupted by her boyfriend's kiss on the lips, surprising her before she kissed him back. Therefore, I'm more concerned for you than I am for myself. How long we have to stay in here doesn't matter to me. Deku blushed when he felt her naked body against his, and he smiled and held her close. Thank you, Deku. Asui said, cuddling close to him with her eyes closed, and he smiled, welcome. With that, they relaxed, Asui enjoying the water on her body and her boyfriend by her side. Sue croaks joyfully and kisses him on the cheek while cuddling close to him. Afterwards, after Midoriya gently kicked open the bedroom door, he smiled and carefully laid a sleeping Asui bridal style on the bed with his full hands, a towel wrapped around her body because she had fallen asleep in the tub, and Izuku offered to take her back to their room. Our ribbit. Suyu opens her eyes slightly, and her boyfriend gives her a quick peck on the cheek. Hey, he said softly, you fell asleep in the bathtub. Izuku goes to his drawers where her clothes are kept and opens one, pulling out a new pair of her white underwear and a green t-shirt. Don't worry, I brought you back to our room, he says, removing the towel from her body, revealing it and making him blush a little. He approaches her again and carefully puts on her undies, sliding them up from her feet to her hips. However, he finds it difficult to get the bands of her underwear up to her hips, so she raises her lower half. Huh? When he looks up, he sees her blushing and staring at him almost asleep. After putting her undies on, he said, Sorry about that. Just wanted you to stay warm in case it's cold tonight. He smiled at her before getting ready to put on her t-shirt, which she assisted with by lifting her hands so her boyfriend could softly put it on. When she's done, Izuku puts on his boxers and lies in bed with her. She croaks in her sleep, ribbit. Ribbit. Deku laughs a little and gives her a kiss on the head. Good night, Asui. As he started to nod off, he muttered, hopefully, we'll do goof on our first day of training with all might. The following day, the green-haired lovers and the other students in Class 1A were in UA for their regular English class. Present Mike, the class's teacher, was asking them all, okay, class, which of the sentences contains a mistake? While waiting for a response from the class, Izuku was writing down notes until he heard a light croak, ribbit. What? He turns to face Suyu, perplexed. She smiles at him and gives him a kiss without anyone noticing, which made her boyfriend blush and then give him another kiss without anyone noticing. Present Mike called out to those who appeared bored or exhausted as they resumed taking notes. Look alive, everyone, grammar is important. Then he sees Momo hold up her hand, saying, Yaoyorozu. Put it on us. As the aforementioned student responds to the query, he smiles and points. Afterwards, Midoriya was about to leave after getting what he needed when he noticed that Asui was using his money to pay for the jello she was getting, but he stopped her by giving his money to Lunch Rush. It was now lunchtime, and all of the teachers and students were in the main cafeteria, enjoying some pretty tasty food at a low cost from his favorite cook hero, Lunch Rush. As the cook cheerfully accepted the money that was given to him, Deku grinned and said, It's on me. Enjoy your meals. Lunch Rush gave the two a thumbs up as they made their way to their empty table. Sue's face flushed and puzzled. Deku. She said as they sat down. I had money, you didn't have to do that. She saw that Ribbit was looking around with a hint of nervousness. Seeing that no one is watching, he says, I know. I'm sorry, just for her to hear. But since you're my girlfriend, I really wanted to. He looks down at his food, expecting Asui to react with something like anger, but instead he gasped in surprise when she kissed him on the cheek. He looks around, hoping no one saw, but thankfully they didn't, and he sighs. Plus, the way you've been supporting me, I wanted to repay you back. There's no reason to repay me, honey. Suyu laughed at Deku's response. I support you because you're my boyfriend, no matter what I'll always be there for you. She snuggles slyly up to his arm, calming him. He was about to turn to look at anyone else when Asui spoke, turning him to face her. No one's looking, it's okay. She smiles. We're safe where we sit. What she says is true, they have the best lunch table. It's in the far corner, covered by some decorative plants and tables, so they're okay for the time being. Okay. But I'll still buy food for you, even if you say no, you're still my girl. Deku nodded and smiled, and Sue blushed. They began eating in silence, which made them both a little nervous, more so for Deku, because it was their first time dining together in the UA cafeteria. After a minute of silence, Asui spoke to him. She tilts her head with her tongue protruding in a cute way and says, I enjoyed our date last night. Thank you for being there in the tub with me. She continues. And helping me to bed last night too. And helping me put some clothes on. Deku interrupted her, coughing from his food going down the wrong pipe. Are you okay? As he drank his juice to wash it down, she patted his back with an anxious expression. Izuku said, Why yeah. He nodded and smiled at her, his face beat red, because of what Suyu had told him, which reminded him of the times he had spent in the bathtub with her, feeling her smooth skin, her full breasts, her pussy, and dressing her while she was half asleep. Deku? He is startled out of his reverie and turns to face Asui, who is wearing a worried expression. Oh sorry, he said, I space out for a minute. He rubbed his head briefly before carrying on with his meal while Sue briefly glanced at him and tapped her chin with her finger. Deku? He gives her a look. Yeah? He gave a smile to her as she looks around to see if nobody's looking and leans in close to him. Come here. He does so voluntarily, and she immediately pulls him into a kiss, surprising him before he kisses her back. He puts his arm around her as she pushes herself up so they can continue kissing, but it doesn't last long because they have to pull, and Asui sits back down to eat, as soon as 2 students from their class arrive and sit across from them. Tenya Iida and Ochako Uraraka were the 2. Would you mind if we side with you? Iida asked, holding his tray up like Uraraka. The 2 green-haired lovers nodded and grinned, and Izuku said, sure not at all. Suyu nodded and grinned, and Ochako smiled back at them as she and Iida put their trays down. As they were eating, they began chatting about their day and how it went. They turn to face Lunch Rush, who gives them the thumbs up, and he says, enjoy the rice, it's one of my specialties. Ochako nods contentedly as the cook hero returns to his kitchen. I see you're savoring today's lunch very well. Afterwards Class 1A had returned to their classroom and was taking notes on the board until the symbol of peace arrived. I am here, they said, looking to see All Might hanging from the door frame and entering the room as if he were a regular person. Now it was time for hero basic training, he yelled, causing the students to gasp and even smile, including Deku and Asui. It's unbelievable. Really, it's All Might. Before Eijiro Kirishima yelled, Denki Kaminari joyfully exclaimed, so he is a teacher. This year will be fantastic. Midoriya, look, Asui whispers to her boyfriend after putting a finger to her cheek and noticing something. He glances at her and then in the direction she indicates. Isn't he wearing his Silver Age costume? She queries him. Grinning, Izuku exclaimed, yeah. You're right, Sue. Yes, he is. It's really awesome. He spoke as softly as he could, causing his girlfriend to laugh at how cute he was staring at the number 1 hero. Welcome to UA High's most significant class. All Might yelled, consider it Heroine 101. Learn the fundamentals of being a pro and what it means to fight for justice here. Let's get started, today's lesson. We'll pull no punches, he said, displaying a card to the class. Hearing that, Deku gulped, while Kachan responded, fight training, real fighting. He muttered, nearly trembling, until a big hand touched his arm. He turned to see Suyu smiling at him, telling him she's always there for him, which made Izuku smile. He shouted with a grin, making me nervous. And the part that looks good is by. The majority of the students applauded as Deku held his backpack with a joyful expression. All Might points towards the wall on the left, revealing a shelf of numbered containers holding cases of the class's hero costumes. These were made and designed for you based on your quirk registration forms and the requests you sent in before school began. Costumes. He then recalls that she was wearing something green that appeared to be skin-tight in one of the pictures Asui sent him yesterday. He watches as she winks at him and smiles before getting up to get her costume, which makes Izuku blush for a second before he gets up to get his own. Afterwards Izuku now heads down the tunnel to Training Ground Beta, where he sees everyone in their respective costumes. Minus the symbol of peace, including All Might, his classmates, and even his lover Asui. Now, All Might started, saying, you bunch of newbies, should we get started? The majority of the pupils gave him enthusiastic or resolute answers. Izuku was looking for Suyu from behind the class and wasn't paying much attention because he couldn't see her. Then he was tapped on the shoulder, which made him jump a little and turn to see her staring at him. He sighed in relief, but he also started to get red when he saw her in her costume. Ribbit. She blushes and looks away, saying, I apologize. I didn't mean to frighten you, Midoriya, but, do you like it? With her hands behind her back and her chest slightly inflated, she whispered, allowing Izuku to see how her hero costume embraced every curve of her body. She watched as he covered his mouth, steam rising from his nose because he was at a loss for words. He thought, she's so beautiful, it's really hard to believe that's the same outfit she wore when she sent him those pictures, but now she's wearing it in front of him, with gloves to match her costume, a belt of some kind, and goggles on her head. Izuku gasped when Minoru Mineta, the student with the grape-shaped hair, said, I love this school. Midoriya looked forward and saw All Might staring at him. Seeing that Izuku's mask had a big toothy grin and tufts like his, but with a wider grin in green. The hero covered his mouth and thought, "You're so obvious." Iida raises his hand and says, "Now that everyone's here, it's time for combat training." The symbol of peace shakes his head and says, "Nope, I'm moving you 2 steps ahead." Izuku is subtly drew back as he describes the various ways attacks can occur both indoors and outdoors and how heroes versus villains will be the training exercise. He gives a little yelp as he sees himself pulled behind everyone. He turns to see that Asui did it, which leaves him perplexed. Is something wrong? She interrupts, carefully holding his head in her gloved hands while whispering to her boyfriend, "Oh Deku. You look so cute." Izuku blushed and laughed nervously because his girlfriend likes his suit. He told her, Thanks. And my mom got it for me," adding, "I'm proud to wear it." He saw Sue smile and tap her finger against her cheek, saying, "That's nice of her." All Might grinned before they could respond. "Midoriya. Asui. You belong to Team A." The two gasped in shock before looking at each other, happy that they'll be fighting together as a team. "We're a team." "Ribbit," Asui croaked while Deku nodded, thinking to himself nervously, "Oh my gosh. My girlfriend is counting on me to make a good impression." He then pulled out 2 balls, one with the letter D and the other with the letter A. "Team A will be the heroes," All Might said, digging his hands into a black box and a white box. "I declare that the first to fight will be," he asserted, glancing at Tsuyu and Izuku. "Team D will be the bad guys." Izuku gasped and Tsuyu gave a startled croak as he asserted, this time glancing at Bakugo and Iida. "Everyone else is welcome to observe in the monitoring room," All Might told them, pointing to the direction of the said room. "Yes, sir." Before going there, the students yell, and as they do, Midoriya glances down at the ground, a little alarmed, not because he was battling Kacchan, but rather because he might injure Asui during the training exercise. However, Sue's words, while holding his arm, cut short his insights. "Midoriya." He looks her in the eyes and says, "It's okay. This is just training, we'll be alright." She smiled and receives a smile in return, but he can still feel Bakugo glaring at him. "Just ignore him," she whispered to her boyfriend and led him to where All Might is waiting. "Hey wait," said Ochako as the two halted and turned to face him. "I just wanted to wish you luck," he said. "All right?" After exchanging glances, the two turned to smile at Uraraka. Izuku tells her, "Thanks, Ochako." Tsuyu nods and croaks, "Ribbit." Ochako smiles and returns to the class. When the green-haired friends arrived at the fictitious building they would be entering, All Might, who was standing nearby, gave them a quick glance before announcing to Tenya Iida and Katsuki Bakugo, "Villains." They turned to face the hero, who gestured toward the entrance, "You may enter and get ready. The heroes will be released and the battle will begin in 10 minutes. Bakugo grunts as Tsuyu croaks and Iida and Izuku speak. "Yes, sir." Ribbit. All Might pointed to Deku and Sue as Katsuki and Tenya entered, handing them an earpiece communicator. "Here," they said, putting the communicator in their ears, "I'll talk to you two through it while you're in battle." Izuku and Tsuyu blushed as he walked away to give them privacy, knowing what All Might meant when he said, "There are no cameras outside, so do what you have to do before going inside." The two lovers exchanged glances after he disappeared. "Should we?" Midoriya was holding Asui's hips while she put her arms around his back. Tsuyu nodded in response to Izuku's question, and they immediately locked lips in a slow but intense kiss before pulling away, both of them gasping for air. Izuku said, "I love you." He put his hands up to Tsuyu's breast and gently massaged them through her tight costume. "Ah, Ribbit. Ribbit. I love you too, Deku." As much as they wanted to continue, they couldn't at this time because they're still in school. She groaned and put her hands on her boyfriend's hands, asking him to rub her breast more. "Asui," Izuku said, maybe it's best if we lose early." He shocked her by holding her in his arms and then they withdrew and looked into each other's eyes. "Why? Is something wrong?" she asks, tilting her head slightly. "Ribbit. Simply put, it's because Kacchan is our opponent." Tsuyu kisses him on the lips and cuts him off, saying, I don't want you getting hurt, Ag." She then pulls away, pausing for a moment before continuing, "Deku, I can take care of myself, there's no need to worry," adding, "Plus, I'm more worried about you." Sue frowns, surprising Deku, who quickly realizes that she meant his quirk one for all. He sighs, looking at his arms with sadness. He smiles at her and says, I know, B, but I won't use it. Asui, I won't use it. That's a promise. We'll rely on your quirk to win this." She croaked a smile at this. Ribbit. He blushes but smiles and gives her a hug in return. Thank you, Deku. She hugs him and kisses his cheek. Within the structure, Kachan was standing by the door in a rage when Iida revealed that the weapon was a fake. Was he really playing me for so long? I'm going to roast that damn nerd and frog face, he thought, frowning, then grinning. Outside she was in Deku's arms, cuddling with him while he kissed her hair, on the floor, holding each other with Asui goggles, but their time together was cut short. All right, through the microphone, All Might yelled, let's start the indoor combat training. Group A, Group D. Now is the beginning of your time. That's when the timer started. Izuku looks at Tsuyu, who nods, and says, I guess we're up. Ribbit. She croaks, puts on her goggles, and jumps on the building. She climbs up the wall to the window, using her tongue to grab Deku and lift him up and inside. Thanks, Su. She nods to Izuku as they cross the hallway. Izuku had Tsuyu walk behind him to keep her safe in case Kachan was nearby. They turned left, and Izuku thought to himself, I still have no basic control of One for All. I can't risk using it. He looked down at his hands and said, if I did, I'll end up making Asui worry about me. Well, we just have to win with her quirk, and whatever I can do without my quirk. Be careful, he warned her. There are a lot of blind spots. She nodded to him. Okay. Izuku leaps back in time to catch Tsuyu as he jumps from the corner with his arm reeled back for an explosive impact on them. He watches as Bakugo hits the wall and blows it to pieces with his explosion. Su, are you okay? Izuku looks at her with worry as she sits up. I'm okay. She notices half of his mask was burnt off. Ribbit. Midoriya. As he helps Asui up, he tells her. As the smoke cleared, they turned to face the explosive blonde and said, don't worry, it's just my mask, I'm fine. What's the matter, Deku? Are you scared to confront me? When Bakugo ran at them, ready to use his quirk once more, Izuku interrupted, I won't hurt you that much. Just stand there and lose. He smirked menacingly at them. I knew you, Ko. Su saves Deku before launching another attack. She leaps and throws him across the hallway with her tongue, only to be struck, causing her to gasp in surprise. Please, Froggy, slow down. Bakugo shouts while throwing another explosive punch. Die. Instinctively, Midoriya rushes at his childhood friend and seizes his arm before he can hurt Asui. Izuku uses all of his strength to flip him over and onto his back with a thud, startling Tsuyu as she gets to her feet. With a croak and a smile, Su thought, wow, look at those moves. Her boyfriend was panting and staring at one of their two opponents angrily from the floor. Kachan, this is between you and me. Don't involve Su. You can call me Deku, but I'm not the same defenseless kid anymore, he said as Bakugo stood up. Do you hear me? From now on, Deku is the name of a hero. He yelled bravely, causing his girlfriend to blush profusely. Asui gasps as she recalls telling Izuku that his name, Deku, sounded adorable on the day of their entrance exam. Bakugo stands up to confront Deku, and he looks at him angrily. Deku. He snarled, his fist clenched. Asui croaked in surprise as Izuku simply stood up and assumed a fighting stance, her tongue protruding as she prepared to push her boyfriend aside if things became violent. With rage in his voice, the hothead yells, you're shaking in your boots, you're so scared, but you want to fight me anyway. That's why I hate you. Iida could hear it from the room he's in because it reverberated throughout the building. Bakugo presses the button on his earpiece and asks, Bakugo, is everything alright? Should I come to help? He turns back to face Midoriya and says, just shut up and defend the weapon. He switches off the earpiece and rushes over to the two, saying, I got more important things to worry about. Su. Go. Izuku says, glancing at Tsuyu, who lets out a startled gasp. No, she said with a headshake. She started to say, I'm not leaving you. But Katsuki jumped over and kicked Midoriya in the face. To Su's surprise, however, Izuku deflected the kick. He gives her a smile that tells her to put her trust in him. While Midoriya battles Bakugo, she nods to her boyfriend, gets on her knees, and hops away, even though she didn't want to leave him against the spiky blonde. When Izuku attempted to use the capture tape against Bakugo during the fight, he managed to use his quirk and avoid becoming entangled in it, but Midoriya was able to move out of the way in time and flee the direction Asui was going. Kachan yelled, get back here, bastard, as he pursued. Up the stairs, Tsuyu and the frog girl started toward the bomb's location but stopped when she heard an angry echo. Get back here, bastard, Asui demanded, turning to face the source of the echo. She tapped her chin, pressed the button on her earpiece, and called for Izuku, thinking, is Deku running away? Deku, come in. Are you there? Izuku replied to her, I'm here Asui, as he hid behind a corner of the hallway he was currently in. They were informed that their communicators are the only way for them to hear one another. He smiled and asked, Are you okay? With concern. Ribbit. Yeah, I'm okay, but please be careful, Sue begged. She did her best not to cry because there are cameras all over the place. Don't let Kachan get to you. Please? Class 1A viewers can still see even though they can't hear. Izuku tells her, Honey, don't worry about me. He peeks out from the corner to make sure Bakugo isn't nearby to hear him say, I promise I'll be fine. I'll keep him distracted while you get the weapon, okay? Suyu grinned. Okay, Deku. Izuku asked, his face glowing red, before cutting off contact. She croaks as requested, surprised by the request. Oh, by the way, could you croak for me? Please? She asks. Ribbit. The class would have witnessed that if the cameras had been in full color. Izuku smiled as he laughed. Asui's face stayed red as she walked to the prop weapon after they had completed their conversation. I love you Asui. I'll see you soon. Down below Deku lets out a sigh as he muses. He imagines Bakugo pursuing him and Iida protecting the bomb. Kachan has gone rogue, he and Iida aren't working together as a team, he says. A vision of Bakugo ambushing him and Suyu flashed through his mind. Their chances at winning are pretty low, yet they have strong quirks. He looks up at the ceiling and imagines meeting Asui with Iida standing in front of the fictitious bomb. I couldn't let Asui stay with me, she would have ended up getting hurt by Kachan. He was startled out of his reverie by Bakugo's irate yells, which sounded closer this time. I'll go to her as soon as I can to help her fight Iida. I just have to capture Kachan on my own. Stop hiding Deku, come out and face me. In the meantime, when Suyu returned upstairs to the weapon room, he saw Iida standing there, yelling at Bakugo through the earpiece that they must cooperate, but the blonde was not responding. Asui climbed the walls and up in silence to avoid Tenya hearing her, thinking, he seems distracted. In the process, she climbed up and examined the prop. She reaches for the bomb in tongue rang, thinking, if I can touch the weapon with my tongue, I can end this lesson fast so Deku gets out unharmed. She whispered, reaching out to touch the bomb, but Iida grabbed her tongue, shocking her. Got it. Aha! He exclaimed through his mask as he pulled her off the canopy and onto the ground, taking Sue's breath away. Fortunately, Tenya was being cautious, so it didn't hurt too much. He gestures toward her. He laughs hard and goes on, I knew you'd come here alone the instant my ally ran off to engage with yours, hero. Iida grins beneath his helmet, startling Asui, who croaks in surprise and backs off a little. While your quirk allows you to climb to walls, I can move many times faster than you. You'll never get the bomb as long as I stand, he says. He really is playing the part. In the meantime, in an attempt to think of something before his communicator called, Deku moved to a different corner. Deku? He replied, realizing it was Asui. He peeks out from the corner once more, searching for Kachan. I'm here, how's it going? He asks. Izuku can hear the sadness in her voice as she says, Iida knows that I'm here. Sorry. She hoped to wrap up the lesson now, but she was unable to do so. Izuku said, Hey, don't apologize Asui, it was bound to happen. Both of them grinned. She responds to him, Where are you anyway? As Izuku hears this, he looks up and realizes he was in the middle of the building. Near the middle of the 5th floor. That's right above me. Izuku mused after they cut off communication. We don't have much time left, I have to capture Kachan or help out somehow. I won't give up. A glow from the corner of his eye jolted him out of his reverie. He turns to face Bakugo, who is pointing one of his gauntlets at him. The gauntlet briefly glows red before he speaks. He gave Izuku a threatening grin and said, I'm all loaded up. Returning upstairs, Asui turns to face Iida, who continues to act villainously while jumping high and getting on her hands during the fighting exercise. Suyu is shocked when Tenya uses his quirk engine to move the weapon in time after she spits out her tongue to grab it. The engine user chuckled after hitting the ground. Not so fast hero, he says, gesturing toward her. Admiral attempt but your quirk no threat. I can easily keep this weapon out of your reach till. Then he and Sue gasped as the building shook, interrupting him. They heard a terrifying eruption from below in addition to the building trembling, which caused them to fall, Asui clinging to the wall for support. Bakugo, what happened? I repeat, what happened? Respond. Asui spoke to her boyfriend while Iida was busy phoning his teammate. With a worried call to Izuku, she hops behind a wall and switches on the communicator in her ear. Deku. What happened? Deku, downstairs again. It was discovered that Bakugo's gauntlet was the source of the earthquake and explosion. The hallway's walls were broken and discolored by soot. The wall at the end was now a massive hole that led outside the building, and the floor and ceiling nearest Bakugo were now rubble-filled craters. Izuku, who escaped the deadly explosion, was breathing heavily on the floor that was still intact. Now terrified, Izuku asks, "What's wrong?" as he glances up at Kacchan, who is grinning menacingly. "You look scared." Izuku heard Asui's voice through his earpiece as he continued to speak, moving slowly but menacingly toward Midoriya. He took a moment to respond because Bakugo had shocked him. "Asui, I'm here." She interrupted him. Even when she told him, he could tell she was very concerned for him. "Deku, are you okay?" Izuku gasped before she could say, "I'm going to get you," and whispered it to her so Bakugo wouldn't hear. As his girlfriend sighs with relief, he smiled and said, "No, Asui, don't. Stay where you are, I'm okay. The blast didn't get me, but I have a plan." Then she asks him. As she listened to Izuku's plan, Bakugo was about to use his other gauntlet when All Might yelled through the earpiece, which the other teams could hear. "Oh, okay. What's the plan? Ribbit." As Bakugo demands an explanation for why he should not use his remaining gauntlet, Midoriya informs Sue, "Bakugo, do not use that blast again. If you do, your team will face immediate disqualification." After he finished, there was a lengthy silence that left him perplexed. "In order for this to work, I have to use one for all. Asui, are you there?" She tried not to cry as she pleaded quietly and solemnly, I'm here. Beep it, Deku. And no, you can't. You'll end up breaking your bones again. Please." She didn't want the class to suspect their relationship. Izuku assured her while maintaining his smile. On the floor above him, Suyu was crying. "Asui. It's the only way, plus it'll only be my arm, not my legs this time. Please, you have to trust me, we can win this." He couldn't see. She takes a whiff before wiping away her tear. With a sad expression, she said, "Okay, but be careful. Please." Deku nodded. Asui croaked and nodded, saying, "Don't worry, I will. Get into position by the pillar near the window and wait for my single. Our ribbit." She wipes some tears from her eyes and switches off the communicator while sniffling. In the meantime, while some of the Class 1A students were discussing Bakugo's natural villainous behavior, Ochako was able to see Suyu's sadness through the screen's camera. Fortunately, no one else noticed, but she did. Uraraka feels sorry for her since she had to intervene when Katsuki was beating Izuku. She says, "Sir," to All Might. She concluded, hoping All Might would end the lesson because he wanted Midoriya to pass, but he didn't. "Shouldn't you end this? He might kill him," she said. Returning with Asui, the frog girl stood by the pillar, staring at the floor and trembling, waiting for Izuku to signal. From below, she heard Deku scream in agony. She was more concerned with saving him than with learning the lesson at this point, but she is still standing by him. As she keeps hearing Deku scream, she tries to hold back her tears, but then she hears through the earpiece. He yelled, "Sue now," to warn her. "Ribbit," she croaks again as she leaps on the wall to get ready. "Ribbit. Right." Iida was so perplexed by this that the floor began to tremble more violently before exploding past the ceiling and creating a hole. Asui was shocked to see pillars, living things, and debris flying everywhere while Iida held onto the weapon as Midoriya used a smash from his quirk one for all to make it happen below. He gasps in shock and releases the weapon as the wind gust forces him to say, what's happening?" When Sue notices this, she touches the weapon and spits out her tongue, aiming for it. As Iida noticed and gasped, she exclaimed joyfully, "I got it," despite the metallic taste. "No, the weapon." With a sigh of relief, Suyu descends, bringing her tongue back into her mouth as she gasps in surprise at the sight of Midoriya lying on the ground with a broken arm and a few minor burns. She yelled, "Deku!" as she leapt through the hole, not caring if Iida heard her. He was too preoccupied with playing a defeated villain to notice. She safely lands on the spot where Deku's body is and leaps to him, clutching his body as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "Deku!" Asui yelled, glancing at him. He was so stunned by the pain that he was unable to react. Sue's eyes narrowed as she saw the burn marks on his body and costume. Kacchan was staring at the floor, lost in thought. The symbol of peace yelled at that very moment. "The hero team. We Enins." "The hero team. We Enins." Asui gently places Deku's head down after All Might yells, "Ribbit." She turns to face Bakugo, who is still staring at the ground, so absorbed in his thoughts that he isn't even aware of her approaching and standing angrily in front of him. She croaks again, pulls her leg back, and kicks Katsuki's kiwis hard. HRGH, he grunted and dropped to his knees, hardly noticing the pain as he continued to reflect on Izuku's strength. Tsuyu, still angry with him, looks behind her and sees All Might assisting Midoriya in being placed on a hammock that will be carried to the nurse's office by two robots, even though she knows he won't even pay attention. Don't worry, young Asui, the symbol of peace reassured her. No one saw anything. You may go with young Midoriya. As she walked alongside the robots carrying the unconscious boy, Tsuyu nodded. She was crying as she held the boy's slightly burned hand. She left the hero alone with Kachan, who continued to stare at the ground, and thought, Deku. The office of the nurse Asui was watching the heroine kiss Midoriya's arm in Recovery Girl's office. Since he had lost most of his energy after the training, he was only able to recover enough to heal his burns and bones. His remaining body must therefore heal itself. Don't worry dear, says Recovery Girl, grinning at Sue as she makes her way to her chair. She sits down and starts working on her laptop, saying, your boyfriend will be fine, he just needs some rest. Stay as long as you like. Tsuyu croaks as he nods and approaches Izuku, taking a seat on a chair beside him. Tears were streaming down her face as she held his smashed arm in sorrow and took off her goggles, setting them on the table. She is confident that he will be fine, but after Bakugo's incident with One for All, she was terrified that he might suffer irreversible harm or worse, be killed. The Recovery Girl frowns slightly as she looks over her shoulder at the two, pitying Asui for having to witness Izuku in this state. She sighed and resumed working on her laptop, knowing that they are together because All Might had told her some time ago. A few minutes later after the training, All Might transformed back into Toshinori Yagi, his slender form, and went into the office. Asui was standing next to Deku, clutching his swollen arm. Recovery Girl saw him and did not appear pleased. She chastises All Might, saying, the second day of school and he's already a regular patient. All Might coughs and splatters some blood on his lower lip before asking, why didn't you stop him? You're right, Recovery Girl, the nurse interrupts him. Well, it's not good enough of an apology to me, she says, turning to face Tsuyu and the other student. She looks back at All Might and says, poor dearie is here worried for the boy that she loves. She's worried about him. Asui sighs and gets up as she speaks to the symbol of peace. She then goes to cover herself and Izuku with the curtains for privacy. Sue didn't care that she could still hear them conversing, even All Might discussing the One for All secret. Glancing back at Izuku, she takes off her belt and gloves, settles in, places them on the desk, and slowly climbs into bed with him. She whispers to him while gently cradling him and pressing her chest against his. Before dozing off beside him, she leans forward and gives him a slow kiss. I love you, Deku. I'm here for you, Ribbit, she says. In the meantime Izuku moans as he rises from the firm concrete surface he was lying on. As he opens his eyes, he realizes he was outside of the United States. Elevated. He was now perplexed. He was at ground beta training, not here. Before rushing to the entrance, he asked himself, where am I? Where's Asui? He yelled as he pushed the doors open. Asui? All Might? Any? He let out a horrified gasp as his eyes adjusted to the interior of the structure. The floor of the UA hallway was covered in UA bodies, and the walls and ceiling were smeared with blood. Students, none of whom resembled his classmates at all. In fact, the bodies are too dissimilar to be identified. But Izuku was shaken by this alone. He asked in shock, quickly realizing the worst-case scenario, what happened here? He heard a croak and yelled, Asui, as he ran deeper inside to find her. Ribbit reverberates through the corridor, sounding both panicked and somewhat nearby. Asui, he exclaims as he dashes down the hallways to Class 1A, where he sees the door shattered and peers in while gasping, Asui. Then, as he looks in, he sees someone hurled directly at him, sending him flying in the direction of the window and breaking it. Upon hearing the well-known moan, he looks at the person who was flung at him and gasps when he realizes it's Tsuyu. He didn't gasp because it was her, but rather because of the condition she's in. She was wearing her hero costume, but there were cuts and bruises on her exposed skin, and some of it appeared to have been torn, damaged, or missing. Asui speaks softly while glancing up at him. Deku. He looks at her angrily, tears streaming down his cheek as he feels hate and rage welling up inside of him. Asui. Who? Before she can say anything more, the wall in front of them starts to deteriorate and crumble, drawing their attention to it as it breaks apart and a dark shrouded figure with long, untidy hair emerges. With a menacing chuckle, the figure moves toward them. Suyu rises and confronts the figure, startling him before Izuku can rush in the direction of the villain. Asui, what are you? She says, turning to face him afterwards. I love you, Deku. His realization of what she was going to do doesn't take long. Izuku instantly stands up and rushes in her direction as the figure lunges at her with a hand outstretched. No. He pushes her aside and freezes when the enemy's hand is just inches from his face. The other hand reaches for Su, and he screams her name before the hands are able to grab their faces. Asui. Leaving the dream. Deku. Deku. Izuku woke up with a gulp of breath and perspiration following Suyu's second shout and shaking. What? He asked, trembling and scanning his surroundings. It is evident that he is in the nurse's office because of the white canopy and the curtains surrounding him. With a sigh of relief, he mentally told himself, phew. It was just a nightmare again. Su cuts it short. Deku, are you okay? When Midoriya looks at Suyu, she has a finger on her chin and a worried, somewhat dejected frown. He says, Asui, to her. What happened? She answers him, bringing him into a tight hug while tears stream down her cheeks, causing him to yell. You passed out at the end of our lesson. Your arm was broken, you had to be brought here to have recovery girl heal you. I was, she says with a hiccup. Recalling the training they had done, Izuku smiled sadly and patted her back with his left arm. I was worried about you, he said. He caught his right arm and winced, saying, It's okay, Asui, I'm okay, ouch. Suyu croaked as he withdrew after realizing she was on his right arm. Ribbit. Sorry, she blushed and said. Izuku waved his good hand and laughed. It was 5 p.m. when he looked at the clock next to the bed and said, Hey, it's all right. Hold on, did you miss every afternoon class? Asui grinned and turned to face her astonished boyfriend. Yes, Ribbit, she said, nodding, I didn't want to leave your side. Izuku smiles at her and says, Thank you. My beautiful girlfriend. Asui's blush reddens as she adds, but that'll have to wait. She looks at his cast-covered arm. I really don't care if I miss class, I just wanted to be in my cute Deku arms. Ribbit, they said, and then Su said, Hey, do you have a dream? He has a flashback of him and Asui being grabbed and reduced to dust, but he doesn't want to tell her for fear of her reaction. She carefully lies down next to him before placing her head on his shoulder, avoiding his chest because his injured arm is against it in a cast. He lied, saying, Oh, I had a dream where I never passed the entry exam, and that I was left alone. He laughed nervously as Su looked at him, knowing he wasn't telling the truth, and she knew she would have to ask him again later if she didn't want to stress him out by asking him now. Ribbit. Okay. She kisses him on his cheek, which he returned by kissing her nose. In response to that, Suyu laid Izuku on his back and gets on top of him gently. She presses her soft body against his body delicately, earning a yelp from Midoriya since her breast through the skin-tight top of the costume pressed against his chest. Asui? A Ribbit? Izuku blushed and smiled as the two leaned into one another. Could you wear your hero costume in our house sometime? As he goes on, she blinks a couple of times. You look really lovely in it. It's hot. Asui's face brightens again. Ribbit. Sure, Deku. They were about to kiss when the curtains were drawn back, but she thinks, wow. He really does like it when I wear my costume. Rise and she. Suyu leaps off of Izuku as Recovery Girl turns away and giggles. Sorry for the interruption, but you two must head back to homeroom now. She interrupted herself when she saw the position the two were in as they turned to face her. The two then took what they needed and departed. Afterwards they had to get their belongings and any work they missed, so Deku and Su walked down the hallway to their homeroom together without having time to change back into their uniforms. Asui stopped close to the stairs because she was holding Izuku's good arm, and Izuku continued to wear a cast on his right arm because the heroine couldn't fully heal him because he lost too much energy during training. What's wrong? Immediately she took him under the stairs where nobody can see them. Luckily most of the students have left to go home so there's no need to worry about being caught. Asui? As she carefully pins him to the wall, Izuku asks, Sorry, I just want my kiss. She leans in and gives him a passionate kiss, but before she can react, Izuku uses his left arm to hold her back and pull her toward him. Deku. Suyu lets out a little groan as she wraps her tongue around his, making him smile from the sweetness of her saliva. They both close their eyes and kiss. I love you, Asui said to him after a few seconds of the two pulling away and staring into each other's eyes. But please don't scare me like that again, or sting you a little with my mucus as your punishment, she said. He tries his best not to because they're still in school and it's not the appropriate time for them to have sex right now, but she smiled after making Izuku gasp at the thought of her using the mucus on him. Sue smiled again as he said, "Hee hee hee. I love you too," and then he gave her a hug. "I'll try not to scare you anymore." Asui holds his left hand as they make their way to their classroom. "Let's go get our stuff," she said, adding, "Everyone else may have left class already." As they arrive at Class 1A, Midoriya sighs slightly in disappointment because he really wanted to see everyone and find out how their match went, but at least Tsuyu was with him. He looks at her and can't help but smile at her gorgeous green hair, thinking, she's so cute. They were shocked to see that all of the members of Class 1A were present when they entered their classroom and opened the door, with the exception of Aizawa, Bakugo, Kaminari, Shoto, and Uraraka. "Hey," Eijiro smiles at them as they turn to face him. "It's Sue and Midoriya. It's great to see you both again." Everyone takes notice of this, and Asui and Deku quickly remove their hands to prevent their relationship from being suspended. "Hey, man. You two were fired up, huh? I'm not sure what you were saying during that match." Before Honta Zero addressed Izuku, Kirishima questioned, "It's unbelievable that you were able to compete with Bakugo, who is incredibly strong. You two did a fantastic job dodging." Mina jumped in. "Yeah, both of you showed up in your match, so none of us held back in ours," she said with a smile as Sato explained. "You weren't very graceful, but I suppose," Yuga adds, but Mina interrupts him. "And you quirks, they're so amazing." They then started introducing themselves, with Eijiro saying, "My name is Eijiro Kirishima. It will be wonderful to get to know you, I must say." Next, Yuga introduces himself. "My name is Yuga." Mina interrupts, causing him to sigh in annoyance. "My name is Mina Ishido. I must say, you two are incredible." Honta Zero. Zero shakes Izuku's hand as Rakido points to himself. "Hey, Sato." Just then the shortest of the 1A students jumps up in a superhero pose. "I'm Minoru Mineta." While Izuku and Tsuyu tell the present classmates how it'll be nice to meet them and wishing they'll get along, Iida shouts, "Tokiyami." The tenure robot approaches the student in question and yells, "Get off your desk. You are showing disdain to the former pupils who have utilized it." Izuku and Tsuyu laughed as everyone turned to stare at Iida. Iida never relaxes, does he? When she was done, they noticed the back door open and saw Ochako and Denki carrying the green-haired lovers' afternoon work they had missed. Kaminari tried to ask Uraraka out, but she brought her attention to the two and gasped in surprise. "Probably not," Midoriya whispered to Sue, who tapped her chin. "Izuku." As she rushes towards them, Ochako asks Midoriya, "Why didn't Recovery Girl heal your injury?" While Denki has a bead of sweat on his head. He started to say something, but Asui interrupted him, saying, his energy was too low, she couldn't heal him completely. Deku also grinned. He saw that Katsuki's seat was vacant at that point. "Hey, where's Kachan?" Everyone looked at him with Sue showing a bit of shock, wondering why he's asking for him. "Oh." Ochako began before telling him, "He left early." A few seconds later, after learning that Bakugo had just left, Izuku ran down the hall to catch up to him, but he was ensnared by Asui's tongue and yelled before she said, "Deku, don't." She begged anxiously, "What if he attacks you once more?" Izuku turns to face her as she unwraps her tongue, and he painfully drops to his knees to get up close enough to meet her gaze. He can see the worry on her face. "Asui, I'll be fine," he assures her, "I swear to you, he won't attack me. Furthermore, he only attacked me because he believed I had been deceiving him for years. All I have to do is speak with him." "Okay." Asui croaked, "Ribbit. Then I'll go with you." She was startled when he shook his head, but he smiled and put his left hand on her cheek, rubbing it until she closed her eyes and cuddled into it in a cute way that he loves. "No," he says with another smile, gesturing to her still wearing hero costume. "Go change, and I'll wait for you outside while I speak with Kachan." "Okay." Then he blushes. I I also want to see you again in your school uniform. It looks cute on you," Sue says, blushing and smiling as she glances around to make sure no one else is in the hallway and kisses him. "All right, Deku. Be careful, please." After saying, "Ribbit," she leaves for the locker room, and Midoriya keeps running, fortunately reaching Bakugo before he leaves the UA grounds to inform him of his quirk. A few minutes later, since Izuku had previously informed her that he would change back home, Asui, now wearing her school uniform, was at his locker getting his belongings and clothes for him. When she opened it, she found his books and other items he would need at home. She knew she didn't have to get his belongings for him, but he was too hurt to carry his bag or books, so she wanted to help him. After all, it was her boyfriend. I wonder what Deku is telling Bakugo. She pondered for a moment before shutting the locker. Ribbit. Before she closed the locker, she jumped a little when she saw Mina and Ochako standing exactly where the door was. Oh, hi Asui, we were just, Mina interrupted, I told you to call me Sue. Ashido blushed purplishly at her own mistake and giggled a little. Oops. Sorry Sue, but anyway what are you? Mina stops when she notices Suyu searching for Izuku's locker. Are you doing that? Ashido raised a brow, causing Asui to become nervous. Well. She lets out a croak, having trouble explaining. Ribbit. Ochako helps her. Oh, remember Mina? Sue is just picking up her best friend's belongings because he is still hurt. You're right. Mina felt a bit embarrassed for almost forgetting about Izuku's injuries. She then smiles. Ah, that's so sweet. They started walking down the hallway together, but Suyu stopped and looked out the window with Ashido and Uraraka looking too, and they saw Deku and Kachan talking. Asui sighs in relief when Mina wasn't looking, still not realizing that Ochako already knows she and Izuku are together. Suyu was shocked to see Bakugo crying while maintaining his angry expression, and as he was about to leave, All Might suddenly showed up and wanted to talk to him about something. Katsuki then said something to him before he left, saying, I wonder what is that all about? Mina questioned until Ochako, who was leaning with her hands and forehead against the glass, informed her and Sue. The ill-fated conflict between competitors. Whatever Deku was saying to Kachan, he looked like he really wanted to punch him. Suyu croaks and puts her finger on her cheek. The three then witness All Might turning to face Izuku and demanding juicy details about what he was saying to Bakugo. Suyu understands her because she is the mother of her boyfriend, so if she were hurt, her parents would also be concerned. Fortunately, his arm doesn't require support because he can move it and Recovery Girl will help it heal completely by tomorrow. After Izuku and Suyu arrived home, Inko couldn't stop talking to her son and her future daughter-in-law about how anxious she has been about Izuku's injured right arm. Deku was currently working on his homework that he and Asui had missed in the afternoon in the living room. He was finding it challenging to write because his writing arm was still broken, and he also noticed that she wasn't present. Asui? He confusedly called for her, but received no answer. Is she in our room? Or the bathroom? Izuku wondered, worried that she might be in the tub again and that she was dehydrated once more. After saying, please be all right, he hurried to the bathroom and knocked on the door, saying, Asui. Are you in there? After waiting for nearly a minute and receiving no response, he began to suspect something was amiss. However, he was relieved when he heard her say, I'm here, Deku. He yelled in surprise and turned to see her smiling, saying, Asui. You're okay. She appeared perplexed. Ribbit. She tilts her head and says, of course I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be? He holds her in his arms, causing her to blush and croak before she cuddles into his chest. Sorry, I thought you were dehydrated again, I just wanted to see if you were okay. She gently holds his badged arm and kisses it, making him laugh. He blushes as she gives him a cute look and says, no, I wasn't. She then reassures him, saying, don't worry, my costume is designed to have full resistance from dry air and sunlight. That's incredible. He was about to lean in for a kiss but she stopped him with her finger on his lips. He gives her a perplexed look. Ribbit. She asks him, wait, I had a question for you. Would it be okay if we went for a walk on the beach? Deku looks curiously at the smiling frog girl and responds, sure, nodding. I just need to get changed and... Asui interrupted him, saying, put on your swim trunks. She croaks joyfully and passes him into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Trunks for swimming? Puzzled, Izuku asked himself, are we going swimming? This late? Why? His face flushed as he saw Sue changing in there, and he went to his room to give her some privacy while putting on his trunks. Afterwards, hours after getting ready, the two green-haired lovers were strolling down the street toward the beach, Asui wearing a yellow shirt, black shorts, and white shoes, Midoriya wearing a white t-shirt, and Izuku holding a towel and Suyu holding her bag. I wonder why she wanted to swim this late, Deku says, glancing at Asui before turning to face the setting sun. Even so, I still need to control one for all, to be a hero like All Might, and two. He thought, continuing to walk while glancing at his arm. And to protect my girl, he said, turning to face Asui. He shook it off, trying not to think about it too much, but he still can't get over the feeling that he lost his life seconds after Sue's in that terrible nightmare. Deku? He looks at his girlfriend. Yeah? What were you saying to Bakugo while I was changing? She asks, and he smiles. As they arrived at the beach, she tapped her cheek with her finger and said, I could have sworn I saw him crying before he left. I could have seen how angry he was, from the window. I told him that I had borrowed a quirk and that I hadn't been lying to him for years. Ribbit. They came to a halt as Suyu turned to face him after realizing what he had said. Oh, of course he didn't take it seriously, Asui, plus All Might warned me not to do that aga. He explained tremblingly. Deku, you really need to be careful with keeping your quirk a secret. Suyu croaks, you shouldn't tell anyone. It would be dangerous, so no more telling anyone, okay? Suyu put her big hands on his head and brought him close to her, face to face, thinking she might tell, but she didn't. She gave her boyfriend a quick smile, and he nodded in return. All right. I promise. With that it earned Midoriya a croak and then a kiss on the lips from Su, who he kissed her back. They pulled away and set up their spot on the beach. Izuku placed the towel on the sand so they can lay down. There, Izuku reflected as he gazed at the beach, which was immaculate because of him and All Might. Well, he was mostly responsible because it was a requirement of his training over the previous 10 months. Well, his face turned rosy red and he almost fainted as he turned at the sound of clothes being taken off and dumped on the sand. He covered his mouth to keep from screaming in shock when he saw Asui wearing a two-piece green bikini that fit her body perfectly but showed off a lot of her skin. It didn't take long for Asui to notice Deku staring at her with a red face, and she croaked with a blush as her arms, belly, hips, and legs shone like pearls in the sunset, and her bikini bottoms hugged the front of her pelvis and the roundness of her butt, while her bikini top flaunted her flawless breasts and cleavage. Why you enjoy it? As her boyfriend holds her in his arms, Asui asks, opening her chest slightly to give Deku a good view of her body. She then lets out a startled croak and looks him in the eyes as he responds, "You're so beautiful." He kisses her on the lips, and she returns the kiss. Su pulled him away after a few seconds, and then she crouchingly looked at him with her tongue out and said, "I'll meet you in the water, my Deku." Her laughter made his face glow as she hopped far enough to carefully enter the water. Wow! Midoriya thought, enjoying the sight of his girlfriend's body. He removed his shirt and shorts, exposing his swim trunks and shoes. Ah! He gasped and clutched his injured right arm, thinking, gotta be careful. He ran to the water, and after it reached his waist, he swam to the spot where Asui had jumped and started searching for her. He had moved a bit too quickly to get into his trunks. Asui! He yells as she emerges from the water in front of him, croaking. They both smile and embrace as Suyu cuddles Izuku. The water is warm, so Asui can stay hydrated and warm. Deku. He turns to see her take out a device and give it to him, which baffles him until he realizes it's an underwater air-breathing device. I want to show you what's underwater. Deku grinned and accepted the gadget, but he hesitated before putting it in his mouth. Wait, he said, looking at her in confusion. Why don't you wear one? She gives him a cheek kiss before plunging into the water, and Izuku laughs and puts it in his mouth before joining her. Ribbit, I can breathe underwater for a while, I'll be okay. Asui croaks with a smile. When he was underwater, he could see the gorgeous water surface illuminated by the moon above, fish, and some jellyfish glowing close by. Suyu then swam toward him and took his good hand in hers, guiding him farther into the water until they reached the bottom, where Deku gasped in wonder. A lot of fish had a lovely glow to them, including seahorses, starfish, and clams with pearls in their mouths. The green-haired boy grinned and turned to face the green-haired girl, who grinned back at him, causing them both to blush and turn away. Suyu holds up a starfish in her hand and shows it to Izuku, who looks at it and says, I always come down here whenever I visited the beach, it helps me relax. Izuku wanted to say something, but he couldn't because he can't breathe underwater like her, so he just nodded as they continued swimming together and exploring for a few minutes until Midoriya discovered that his device was out of air, causing him to gasp. He tries swimming up, but it hurts, making it almost impossible. Su surprised him by swimming up to him, taking the device out of his mouth, and kissing him on the lips. Then he realized she was giving him air, so he kissed her back through it in return for saving him. Hold on tight. Suyu wraps her tongue around him and swims quickly, assisting Izuku along the way. When they reached the surface, Midoriya gasped for air while Asui held him anxiously. Are you okay? I apologize. Ribbit. What's the reason for your apology? It was my fault for not paying attention to my oxygen level, he said, bewildered. Izuku laughed nervously, causing Suyu to croak as she slowly cuddled back into his arms, her head resting on his bare chest. His face turned rosy as he felt her nearly fully exposed body against his, particularly her breast pressing against his abdomen. When they reached the sand, they stood and walked over to their towel, sitting down on it together. As they relaxed, Izuku glanced at Suyu, who was still wearing her bikini, and quickly looked around to make sure no one was nearby. Let's go back. Sue smiled and looked at Deku, who nodded in agreement, because it was already night and the water might get cold for her if they stayed any longer. Fortunately, no one is around, but he still doesn't want anyone to see his girlfriend's body, so he took his sweater out of his bag and put it on her, causing her to croak in surprise and groan a little as the texture of the sweater touched her bare skin. She looks at herself in the knee-length sweater. Deku, why did you put your sweater on me? She asks, looking at him bewildered. Izuku smiled as her face blushed slightly. Sorry. It might get cold, so I brought it with me in case you get cold or fall asleep. Plus, he said, looking around and seeing no one. Then he told her, his face glowing as well. Just in case people are around. He quickly notices that she is staring him in the eyes, which makes him anxious. He is shocked when she gently pushes him onto his back, laying him on the towel, and then she slowly climbs on top of him, pressing her body against his once more. Since she was wearing his sweater, Midoriya was unable to feel her body this time, but he didn't mind, and he holds her body close to his while they gaze at each other. There are no people here, Deku. Do you believe me? She smiles. I mean, nobody comes this late. Izuku's tongue wrapped around Midoriya's during their kiss, and he even lifted up her sweater a little bit so he could get a hold of her hips. He started to rub the smooth skin of her legs up to her bikini bottoms, getting a good grab of her butt with his right hand, earning a delighted croak from Suyu. It's so sweet of you. Thank you. She then smells the sweet scent coming from the sweater she's wearing. He laughed, but felt her slowly kiss him on the lips, and he returned the kiss, causing their bodies to press against one another. Ribbit. Izuku next brought his other hand further up the sweater and under Sue's bikini top, caressing her breast while also pinching her nipple between his index finger and thumb. Ah! Ribbit ribbit. Asui groaned and croaked during their kiss, relishing her boyfriend's touch. Before they could continue, Asui gradually withdrew, gazing into Midoriya's eyes, who smiled but then it vanished when she inquired. What actually transpired in your dream, Deku? I told you it's where I didn't pass the... He was interrupted by his girlfriend, who looked worried. Deku, please. Tell me the truth. I know you're lying. He looks at her in shock as she cuddles close to him, enjoying the warmth of the sweater he gave her and his arms that embrace her figure underneath. Izuku looks down at her, not really wanting to tell her what he saw, but not wanting to worry her either, so he decided to come clean. Suyu pleaded, snuggling her head just below his chin and staring at him with her gorgeous frog eyes. I saw the fear in you whenever you wake up from your nightmare. Please, be honest. He began, okay. It all started with me waking up in front of UA. I went inside and saw bodies, dead bodies everywhere, because I had no idea why or when I was there. The UA students who were killed. They were unidentifiable. I couldn't tell if they were our classmates or not, but I tried searching the entire school for you, but then. He looks like he's going to cry, and Asui gasps and holds him close. It's okay. You can tell me, she said, kissing his forehead and part of his head, allowing him to take some deep breaths to calm down. Then, I heard you, one of your croaks. It sounded alerted, so I ran. I ran as fast as I could reach our classroom. When I opened the doors, you were thrown right at me, he continues. Tears began streaming down his face as he opened his mouth to say, why you were going to try to fight him. When he charged, I pushed you out of the way to save you, but... Suyu ribbed softly, staring down at him in disbelief. Oh. Deku, she thought, cradling him in an embrace and massaging his bare back. Don't worry, I'm fine, Deku. Ribbit. He looks at her as she goes on, as long as I'm with you, you'll never lose me, I'll always be by your side, as your girlfriend, my cute Deku. She smiles and kisses his head, saying, that nightmare wasn't real, I'm real, nothing will happen to me. She gently pulled him away to get him to look into her eyes. As they lay there on the beach for a short while, Izuku looks her in the eyes and hugs her, holding her in his arms and refusing to let her go. Don't go. He begged in tears, which caused her to smile and cuddle in his arms. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, she reassured him. After he felt better, the two started packing their belongings to go home. Midoriya was picking up the towel to put in the bag when he turned around and yelled a little because he had seen his girlfriend take off the sweater to reveal her bikini once more. She giggled and put on her shirt and shorts again before putting the sweater on again to stay warm. She lets out a croak, and Izuku sighs with relief as he looks at her and says, Deku, you can look. Her boyfriend blushes as she points out, I am your girlfriend, and I wasn't naked. I know, sorry. But, he says, lowering himself to her level and giving her a hug. The words, thank you, Asui, caused her to blush and then give him a hug in return. "You're welcome, honey." She then kissed him on the cheek and he kissed hers back. After they parted ways, they began walking home while holding hands. The two went to shower as soon as they got home. Since Midoriya insisted, Asui entered first. She had intended to ask him if he wanted to take a shower with her, but she decided against it because it wasn't appropriate. Instead, she planned to surprise him with something immediately following her shower. A few minutes later, Izuku exits the shower and dries himself off, sighing with satisfaction that his shower was completed after hers. After finishing, he ties the towel around his waist and examines his image in the mirror, observing the fear and seriousness in his own eyes. Despite being assured that everything will be alright and that the girl he loves will always be by his side, he fears losing her. He smiled at the thought of that. "I just hope I get better soon," he says, his hands balled into fists as he looks at them. He finished telling himself, "I want to protect my Asui." He got dressed, taking off the towel before putting on his boxers and pants, but he was confused because he couldn't find his shirt in the bathroom. His thoughts were, that's strange." He looks into the hamper to see if he might have placed his clean shirt inside, but blushes when he sees his girlfriend's underwear there. "I could have sworn I brought a fresh one in after Asui was done." He sighs in defeat after searching the bathroom for it and failing to find it. He exits the restroom and makes his way to the bedroom where he and Suyu share a bed after thinking, "I'll just get a new one." The smell of cooking food stopped him in his tracks as he was ready to open the door. He takes another whiff and then thinks to himself, "Something smells good." He smiles. Now he heads to the kitchen and says, "It's Katsudon. Mom must be home early." As he enters the kitchen, he says, "Thought she wasn't going to be home till later." "Hey Em." He stopped speaking and froze. Suyu, in his shirt and apron, stood close to the stove. Her shirt only hung down to her thighs, hugging every curve of her hips and torso while the apron hung from the front of her body. But the thing that surprised him the most was that she was preparing dinner. She finishes cooking and turns to smile at him, saying, "Ribbit." "Deku," she said, putting a finger to her cheek. As she showed her boyfriend the plate of katsudon she had poured into the bowl, she asked, her face flushed, "I made you dinner. If that's okay?" Since it's his favorite food, he looks at it in wonder and gives her a red face. He grinned as she put the plate down on the table and turned back to face him, saying, Asui, why you didn't have to do that." She gives him a smile while avoiding eye contact with his toned physique. "Well, as you said, I'm your girlfriend. So you're my boyfriend. I'll make it, even if you say no also. Your arm is still in need of healing. Remember?" Izuku gasped as she removed her apron. Although his arm still hurts, he nearly forgot that he told her at lunch that his favorite food was katsudon. He was so preoccupied with Asui during training that he was unaware of the extent of his pain following the use of One for All. Sue approached him and held his arm while kissing him on the arm, expressing concern with a small sigh. She massages the arm gently and asks, "Are you okay?" Izuku wanted to yell, but her hands stroking his arm made him feel better. He wouldn't lie. The massage is beginning to make him feel a little better. I'm okay," he smiled and said to her. "Thank you." Sue croaks as he embraces her and kisses her forehead, and she hugs him back while nestling against his bare chest. After that, they withdrew and sat down to eat closely together in their seats. Asui prepared a salad for herself while Midoriya ate the katsudon, but she heard Izuku say something to her before she ate. She tilts her head slightly as she looks at him and says, "Thank you." "Ribbit?" Izuku asked, grinning at her. Suyu giggled as they exchanged glances for a few seconds, and Izuku turned away, blushing. "For making me dinner, thank you." He nods to her and they exchange a smile before they start eating. "You're welcome, Deku, now eat up. We need our strength for our training tomorrow." Izuku looked at Asui's bare legs as they went, and the way they glinted in the sunlight made his face flush. Since it was difficult to determine whether she was wearing anything underneath, he wondered, her legs are too exposed, is she? Is she not wearing anything underneath? As he imagined her wearing nothing underneath for him, he thought, maybe she's wearing shorts? A bra at least. Or undies. However, when she caught him staring at her legs while tapping her cheek with her finger, he yelled and looked away. A giggle escaped Suyu's lips as he turned away, eating more quickly, his face flushed. She thought to herself, adorable. She quickly resumed eating her salad. Afterwards, after finishing their meal, the two went to their room to finish their homework, primarily their afternoon assignments because they had missed some classes because of Izuku's injuries and Suyu's stay with him in the nurse's office. She didn't mind, though, because she wanted to be with him until he woke up. At the moment, Izuku was staring at Suyu with wide eyes as they conversed while working. "What? No way. Seriously. He opened his mouth wide. When Midoriya heard, "You kicked Kachan while I was out cold," he was completely taken aback. Asui narrowed her eyes and looked at her notebook, nodding. She shook her head and turned to face him. "Yes, Ribbit, after what he did to you I just couldn't let him get away with it," she said. She smiled at him and said, "That's why I kicked him right where it hurts the most." "Asui," Izuku said, appearing anxious. "He didn't hurt you, she interrupted him. She shook her head. "No he didn't," she said. She smiled cutely and Deku sighed in relief. He then made her croak in surprise by holding her in his arms, which made her blush before cuddling up to his bare chest. "Actually, I think he was too focused on the way you beat him. I don't think he cared or acknowledged that I kicked him or not, so don't worry, Ribbit," he said. "I'm glad." First, he holds her carefully and gives her a kiss on the head, to which she responds with a croak and a kiss on the cheek. "You're so brave. But just be careful around him. He won't go easy on girls. Still, I'm happy you're alright." "No," she said. He chuckled when he heard, "I'm happy you're okay, my cute Deku." "Ribbit?" he asked as he held her close. "Asui?" She gives him a look. "Yes, Ribbit?" she asked, looking him in the eyes. He remained silent, leaning in and kissing her neck slowly, making her croak in surprise. She groans in an attempt to stop him, saying, "Ribbit? Deku. Ribbit wait." "Ribbit." Fortunately, he smiled and moved away from her neck. She wants it to happen but knows they can't because of their heavy homework load. His blushing girlfriend gave him another croak after he said, "Sorry about that. I just really wanted to hear your croaks. They're cute." She smiles and croaks, "Ribbit Ribbit," to her boyfriend, who is now laughing with her. Before returning to their homework, they carry on talking for a little while longer. Afterwards Midoriya sighed with relief as he and Sue completed all of their homework at 11 p.m. He glanced at her, and she smiled back at him. He laughed nervously and said, "Man, that was a lot just for the afternoon classes." Asui tapped her cheek. She soon saw Izuku staring sorrowfully at his injured arm and said, "UA is intense." When she sees this, she has an idea and effortlessly takes his arm. "Come on." She gets up from the chair and takes Midoriya, who is now perplexed, with her until he notices her lying back on the bed and follows her down. Sue croaked and giggled as his face turned rosy red upon realizing he was on top of her. She gently massages the front of his muscular body, saying, "Now that we're done, relax, honey." With her tongue protruding in a cute manner, she concluded, "We can have some alone time together. Ribbit." A smile comes to Izuku's face as he looks at her. Without wasting any time, he leaned down and gave Suyu a passionate kiss, holding her close as she returned the kiss and wrapped her tongue around his while croaking and moaning. After almost 5 minutes of kissing in this manner, they pulled away to catch their breath. After exchanging glances and taking a deep breath, Deku carefully lowers himself and plants a kiss on Sue's neck. "Deku. Ooh, Ribbit." She groaned, her cheeks flushed. He pulls Midoriya away as he reaches her smooth thighs and then slowly lifts the shirt she is still wearing to reveal more of her legs. When he reaches her pelvis, he reveals her light green underwear that is still snug against her hips. With a smile, Izuku pulled the shirt up further and thought, so she was wearing something after all. Asui was about to take off his pants to continue, and Midoriya was about to pull down her undies when their bedroom door opened. Inko screams in shock as she opens her eyes and says, "Izuku, Suyu, sorry I'm." Her son screamed and pulled his shirt back down to cover Asui's breasts and undies as she croaked in surprise and flushed. "Ah!" she exclaimed, covering her eyes and closing the door on the opposite side. "I'm so sorry," Inko said, apologizing across the door. As two green-haired lovers exchanged glances, she hurried to her room and said, "I should have knocked, sorry." They were silent for a few seconds before they began to laugh at what had transpired. He laughed uneasily, but he felt a kiss on his cheek as he said, "Sorry about that, I forget to lock my door." Asui smiled at him and said, "Ribbit, it's okay." Izuku nodded in agreement, saying, "But it's probably best if we go to sleep." "Yeah." He then lies on their bed while Sue slowly lies beside him, nestling her head against his chest. He smiled, put his arms around her, and planted a kiss on her head. By croaking, Asui tells him, "I love you, Asui." She smiled back at him and said, "I love you too, Deku." They then shared another kiss before closing their eyes and gradually drifting off to sleep in each other's arms. That evening the two slept soundly in each other's arms for hours after going to bed. After hearing something, Suyu wakes up and opens her eyes, croaking, "Ribbit. Ribbit. Ribbit. Our Ribbit." Despite her exhaustion, She sat up to listen for the sound, but she was unable to see because it was dark. She soon heard sniffles that sounded almost like sobs. "Hum?" she asks, looking at her boyfriend, but seeing nothing else. To turn on the lights, she turns to face the wall with the switch and uses her tongue to flick it. As she turns to check on Izuku, she gasps in surprise to see tears streaming down his cheeks from his slumber. In his sleep, he was crying. Then she wakes him up. When he said, "Deku. Deku, wake," she was interrupted. In his sleep, he whispered, "Asui. Please, don't go." Sue was startled to realize that he was experiencing the nightmare once more, and she began to shake him awake. She shook and yelled, "Deku, please wake up. Deku." It worked. Izuku opened his eyes, gasped, and sat up, staring at his girlfriend with tears in his eyes. She worriedly exclaimed, "Deku, are you okay?" Ribbit, but was taken aback when he embraced her right away. He sobs to her, refusing to let go. "Don't go. Don't go." Asui tilts her head up at him, believing he had that dream again in which they perished. She cradles him in her arms, attempting to console him as much as she can. She patted him on the back and said, "It's okay." As he continues to sob quietly, she reassures him, "I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere," with her head now nuzzled beneath his chin. "I'm always here, honey." After 20 minutes once he was completely at ease, Asui went out of the room to get Midoriya a drink to cheer him up. He was sighing as he sat on the edge of their bed. He looked down at his hands and thought, "I can't believe I had that nightmare again. For the third time. Thoughts of, I gotta stop having this nightmare. It's not real," were interrupted when Sue entered through the open door with a box in her hand. She went over to him after locking the door to prevent Inko from entering again. "Ribbit, here," she says as she hands him the box, which turns out to be a carton of strawberry milk. She smiles as he looks at the box and accepts it, saying, "Drink this, it'll help you." Thank you, Asui." Suyu gets on the bed and crouches on her hands and feet, staring at him while he drinks some of it. Even though he is feeling better, she can still see the fear in his eyes. "Deku?" He looks at her to get his attention. "Yeah?" he asked with a feeble smile before realizing that she was crouching like a frog and that he could see a small portion of her light green underwear beneath his shirt. As Sue touched her cheek, he did his best not to look too intently. "Remember what I said at the beach? I'm real, nothing will happen to me, Deku. Because I know you'll protect me, no matter what." She smiles at him. "You're my hero." She gives him a gentle hug and cuddles up to him. After giving her a quick glance, Midoriya surprises her by letting her sit on his lap. "Ribbit!" she exclaimed, flushed. "Asui?" asked Izuku. How did I end up being so lucky to have you by my side?" he was asking. Tears started streaming down his face once more. Do I really deserve you?" he asked. As she looks at him and wipes away his tears, he holds her head in his hand and says, "I'm just glad that you're my girlfriend." He looks at her as she holds his face in her big hands. She began, "You do deserve me, Deku." Midoriya smiles and gives her a kiss on the lips, which she returns. "No matter what, I'll always be at your side, remember that." "Ribbit." She smiles with her tongue protruding in a cute way. As he gently places her on the bed and lies beside her, holding her in his arms, they withdrew. "Thank you so much, Asui. I'm feeling so much better now, but..." He yawns in exhaustion. "Wow, I'm feeling tired." Suyu croaked in laughter as he struggled to keep his eyes open. "Ribbit. That's because your body is exhausted from training with All Might and healing from Recovery Girl," she stated. "They took so much of your energy. That and we swam at the beach. So you really need to get some SLE." Seeing that her boyfriend had gone to sleep, she paused. She giggled because he was snoring and had his eyes closed. "Ribbit. Adorable." Sue then pulled the covers over their bodies and embraced Izuku, wrapping his arms around her. Her blush returned as he held her close to him, at which point she kissed his cheek slowly before dozing off in his arms. At 5 in the morning, Asui was cradling in Midoriya's arms and croaking in her sleep as Izuku's arms encircled her and she snored softly. They were sleeping as much as they could before school started in a few hours, but that was short-lived because Inko ran into the room and kicked open the door. Suyu's croaks didn't bother him because he enjoys hearing them. "Izuku. Suyu. Wake up," she exclaims as she switches on the room's light. "I have a surprise for you." Suyu croaked in shock and fear as the two awoke, Izuku gasping. Sue's face reddened as she pulled the bedsheets over her body as they looked at Inko awake. She was wearing only her underwear underneath her boyfriend's shirt, but she wasn't naked. Izuku looks at his mother wearily as he rubs his eyes. Mom? See, couldn't this wait till morning? He asks, still a little taken aback by the unexpected alert. To check the time, he looks at his alarm clock. Midoriya cried out in surprise. 5 in the morning. He doesn't understand why his mother can't wait until morning, but it must be something significant, right? Nope, Inko said with a headshake. She smiled broadly as she shut the door and started cheering from outside, which the two could hear. It can't wait. Hurry up. Put some clothes on and meet me outside, she said. Then Izuku's girlfriend said something. She yawns, your mom really is. Ribbit, excited, isn't she? Izuku agreed and laughed uneasily. When he turned to see that Asui had fallen asleep and her eyes were closed, he stopped. Why yeah, sorry about that, she only wakes me up whenever shish. As he said. He grinned and laughed once more before gently holding her body and putting her back in bed until she stopped him and opened her eyes only partially. She slowly got out of bed and said, and no, I'm okay. Izuku was a little concerned because she still appeared to be very exhausted. She interrupted, smiling reassuringly, are you sure? You know you can stay here and get some. Her words. Deku, I'm okay. Really? She stands back up and leans in to give him a cheek kiss, which causes him to smile and blush a little. She goes on, and besides, following the kiss, I really want to see the surprise she has for us. Her eyes were half open and she smiled with her tongue out. Seeing this, he returned the smile and put his hand on her cheek, allowing her to cuddle up to it while blushing. All right, said Izuku. After kissing her head and getting a croak, he says, let's get dressed and see what it is she wants us to see, Ribbit. After getting ready, Izuku went to his closet, took out a brand new black t-shirt, and put it on. He turned to face Tsuyu, who was heading to the drawers to put on a pair of black shorts when she heard Midoriya. She watches as he approaches her and says, wait. Yes, Deku? She smiles, observing his anxious gaze as he inhales deeply before posing the question. She croaks in surprise as red returns to her face, but she shouldn't be since they are lovers. May I put your shorts on for you? He asks, turning away from her. Izuku answers right away, saying, of course you can. Sorry, I shouldn't have. He stops when he hears her words. Wait, I can? Asui giggled, his face flushed. Yes, she says with a nod. Izuku walked over and handed the shorts to her mother, saying, but we have to hurry, we don't want your mom waiting. As Sue grabbed the edge of his shirt and lifted it up to reveal her light green underwear, he sat down on his bed and held them. Izuku jumped a little, but he remained composed because he remembered what she had told him. It's okay to look. He lets out a calming sigh, smiles, and assists her in putting on the shorts. She can grip his arms as she slides her feet through the legs, which makes her smile and tap her cheek. Deku stopped pulling her shorts up, confusing her by pausing above her knees. She thought, Deku really is shy around me. It's still adorable. She blushed a little as she looked. He paused and stared at her underwear, focusing on the imprint of her pussy. She said, Deku, please stop staring, she croaks, causing him to yell, you're making me blush. Then he said, sorry, about that. He continues pulling her shorts all the way up, and she smiles as she gently holds his cheeks with her big hands. He turns to face her as she gives him a passionate kiss on the lips, which he returns until they pull away. You're just so hot, I'm sorry. Tsuyu lets out a croak. Ribbit, don't apologize, she said. He nods and smiles as she says, we just need to go see the surprise is all. Plus you're so handsome. My cute Deku. He then gives her a kiss on the nose and gets up. She gives him a nod before they leave the room, saying, then let's go. They proceed directly to the front door and then out into the hall as they make their way to the living room. Before they noticed Izuku's mother, Inko, standing directly next door, grinning, they could see that it was still dark at 5 in the morning. Asui holds his arm and cuddles up to him. Izuku yawned and asked, Mom? What's the surprise you wanted to show us? Inko gave them a smile. She laughed nervously, making the two teenagers blush a little. Well, you see, ever since Sue moved in with us, I've been feeling bad for always walking in on you two whenever you two have a moment. Deku spoke after shaking it off. Mom, it's okay, there's no reason to. Wait. Inko interrupts, asking. She goes on, let me finish, sweetie. As they gaze at her, she holds out a key and says, now after I walked in on you both hours ago, I've been thinking a lot, and I think you two should have this. The key is puzzled. Asui touches her chin with a finger. A key? What for? She inquired, causing Inko to giggle. It's for your new apartment, right here, next door. She yells after tapping on the door outside her apartment. Then, surprise, she said. Well, What? She said, pausing when she noticed their shocked looks. The silence was broken by her son. He said, Mom. Why? And how? Asui was still in complete shock, but he was also a little excited. They are free to enjoy their privacy as much as they like, but she isn't sure about it either. Izuku's mother simply grinned while gazing at him and Suyu with tears of happiness. Izuku exclaims, flushed, "Oh sweetie, I just wanted you two to have a happy life together. You know, just in case you get married and have key." Mom. Asui, who was standing beside him, giggled when she saw his flushed face. Mom, Izuku said first. I don't think we need an apartment. Besides, you wouldn't be able to afford it. Oh, don't worry about that, sweetie, Inko said to her son, who was holding the hand of his new girlfriend. She smiled warmly at the two lovers and said, "They gave me a fair price for it. Please accept it." Looking back at Inko, Asui tells her that Izuku is unsure. "How about we think about it?" Izuku's mother smiled and nodded. "Sure, take the time you need. In fact, here." After giving them the apartment key, she says, "Look inside. It'll help you decide." Inko then leaves the two alone and returns to her apartment. The two blush and turn their heads away from one another because they felt a little uncomfortable. Midoriya smiled and said, "Want to see?" Asui nodded and croaked. Izuku says, "Ribbit." Sure. And unlocks the door to let her in. "After you." He grinned, acting like a gentleman and making her laugh. She thought, adorable, thank you. They entered the apartment and began to look around, noticing that it was empty but that it looked nearly identical to Inko's. Looking around, Izuku approaches a room and opens the door to discover that it is large enough to accommodate a king-size bed. He closed the door after thinking, it's bigger than I thought. He then turned to face Sue, who was sad and looking through the kitchen, mostly the floor. Izuku approaches her with concern and puts his arms around her waist, drawing her near. Before she sighed, he kissed the back of her head and asked, "Are you okay?" Her head shook slightly. "Ribbit. I'm honestly not sure," she said. She looks at him and taps her chin, saying, "I like the apartment but it feels a bit odd." Izuku smiles and kisses her on the lips. He said, "I know. Me too," as she turned to face him. "I could tell Mom we don't need it." She kissed him on the lips and half-lidded her eyes after telling him, "Ribbit. You don't have to." He gives her a kiss in return after she tells him, "We could give it a try, get used to it as time passes." He gives her another kiss after saying, "Sure. We can do that." But it doesn't end there. Realizing what was about to happen, Asui croaks as Midoriya slowly raises her up and leans her against the wall during the kiss. She then pulls him away, leaving him perplexed. As she goes on, he gently places her down and says, "No, Deku, we can't, not right now." The two turn away, flushed. "We still need to tell your mother of our decision of this apartment." Ribbit. With a "Why yeah, you're right." Izuku accepted her hand. "Let's." Suyu interrupts him with a yelp, wrapping her arms around his arm and cuddling up to him in a cute manner. Izuku laughs as they leave their apartment. In the meantime, Inko was waiting for the two people who had just come in through the front door of her apartment in the living room. "Mom?" Izuku asked. He says, "We decided we." But Inko interrupts. They remained silent as the mother went on, saying, "Wait, honey, before you tell me, I just wanted both of you to know, I brought the apartment just for you two to enjoy." That made her son and his girlfriend blush. "You two can have some time alone together with no interruptions of someone walking in. I really don't want to disturb your moments with Asui, and I don't want to ruin any chances of you two getting married and having kids in the future. But I'll insist, even if you say no. Please, Izuku?" She responded with a grin. This startled Izuku, who then felt Asui give his hand a slight squeeze. Ribbit. He notices that she is smiling reassuringly at him. "Deku," she whispers to him. "We can do this. Plus, keep in mind what your mother said. No matter how strongly we say no, she will never stop urging." Midoriya grinned slowly and nodded to his girlfriend. "Okay, Mom," he says, glancing at Inko. "We accept." He is interrupted once more, this time by his mother, who is embracing him tightly while sobbing with happiness. "Oh, my baby," she exclaimed, almost squeezing his breath away. She exclaims, "Thank you so much. You're growing up so fast." Her son blushes in shame and then gives her a comforting hug in return. No, he wasn't embarrassed by this. Rather, he was embarrassed by Asui's presence, as he tried to contain another laugh, which he finds endearing and caused him to smile at her. Afterwards, Asui yawned as she walked back into their room and lay down on the pillow that was nestled inside the bed. She looked at Izuku as he removed his shirt, exposing his muscles, and her face turned rosy red. She approaches him and rests her head on his chest as he climbs into bed with her. Izuku smiles as she yawns again and her eyes get heavy. I guess we're moving in tomorrow, huh? She asks. Yeah, I suppose we are, he said with a nod. It took Asui just 2 minutes to realize and stop him after he mumbled, it won't be so bad. After all, we'll have our private moments. And we can even study for school as much as we can. Gah. He tells her, covering his mouth. Sorry about that. He turns to face Sue, who is soundly asleep and making a cute croaking sound through her snores. Ribbit. Ribbit. Izuku smiled and gave her a gentle head kiss. He puts his head on his pillow and then nods off, letting them both get a few hours of sleep before school. Good night, Asui. Get some rest before school. Early in the morning after eating breakfast and getting ready to leave for another day of UA High, Midoriya and Asui stopped when they heard. They turned to see Inko smiling and saying, oh, by the way, to them. She shows this by hovering her hand over a table, making it float an inch or two off the ground. I'll be moving your stuff into the new apartment. I'll be using my quirk in case some of the stuff is heavy. As he looks at the clock, Inko interrupts. Mom, you really don't need to do that. Asui and I can move them are. She yelled. Oh, look at the time. You two should be heading off, bye. And pushed them both out the door before closing it and leaning against it while letting out a happy sigh. As she made her way to her son's room to start his and Asui's move next door, she thought, now, I better start. Afterwards Izuku and Tsuyu made it to UA while walking hand in hand and chatting. Izuku is sharing with his girlfriend how the sludge villains nearly killed him when he first met All Might. Asui worried her boyfriend, who gave her a tight hug, by asking, oh Deku, are really? With a hand over her mouth and tears welling up under her eyes. He gave her a pat in return and said, hey don't worry. He smiles at his girlfriend as she wipes away her tears and smiles back, saying, that was 10 months ago, but yes. Luckily All Might saved me in time, so don't worry, okay? She gives him a hug in return. Ribbit. Okay, but still I wish I could have been there to help. Sue gave Izuku a pleasant croak as he said, I know but hey, at least I'm here, right? As they proceeded, she replied, yeah. Tsuyu was lost in her thoughts when she realized that, despite meeting Izuku at the beach 10 months prior, she had never explained her purpose for being there. She wasn't sure how to tell him, but she must do it quickly because she can't keep it a secret indefinitely. She then smiles as she looks at Deku. No, her decision was made. Now she must tell him. Deku. Wait. He pauses and gives her a look. Yes? He asked, grinning and holding her cheek with his hand, which caused her to blush a little. She truly loves it when he does this because it feels secure and warm. She looks up at him and cradles in his hand as he nods, asking, do you remember the first day we met? He inquired anxiously. Yeah, almost 10 months ago. Why? Is something wrong? No, nothing wrong. Asui laughed in response to him. But I just wanted to say is. She paused when they saw that the majority of the people outside the school gates were reporters and members of the media gathered around the entrance. Tsuyu sighed in disappointment when Izuku asked, that weird. But what were you saying? She wanted to tell him, but she would have to wait until another day. And nothing. Midoriya was somewhat perplexed by this. She smiled at him and he smiled back, telling her, oh, all right. But if there's anything you want to talk about, I'm always here to listen, remember you're my. They halted and turned to see a reporter in a blue suit standing in front of them with a microphone. Hey, you. They said. What is it like to work closely with the symbol of peace, All Might? Deku jumped when he heard the question, and his face began to perspire. He takes her hand and says, sorry, we gotta go to the nurse office, yeah. Let's go, Asui. She blushes and croaks as they run to the gate, but the reporter stops Tsuyu, forcing Midoriya to stop. Asui looks, and she says, hey, please tells us what is it like to work with All Might. But the reporter interrupts her with another question. Why is he working here? Someone else interrupts. Please tell us. She was feeling very uneasy because of all of these inquiries. When she realized it was Deku who had covered her with his body, her vision went black and she was only able to make out a red tie. He yelled, hey, back of, leave her be, as he led her through the gates, and Sue could hear the rage in his voice. He was shielding her from reporters. Her face flushed as a result, and she quickly assumed he was thinking about his nightmare. She felt her heart melt when she saw him smile at her, even though he is being overly protective of her. She blushed and nodded to him. Hey, you alright? She asked. He blushes as he rubs her hair and she cradles into his chest, saying, our Ribbit, yeah. Thank you. Ribbit, Ribbit. He smiled warmly and thought, she's so cute. No matter what, he would always keep her safe. They realized they were still holding each other when they looked into each other's eyes. They quickly withdrew, blushing deeply red, to ensure that no other students or teachers noticed. Fortunately, none of them were passing by or nearby, which allowed the two to exhale in relief. Midoriya asks Asui, ready? And she nods while sticking her tongue out. She croaked, Ribbit, as they entered the school together, oblivious to the danger across the street. A few hours later, Mr. Aizawa was in their classroom explaining their lesson from yesterday with all might. He also watched the video feeds and reviewed the outcomes of each of your teams. You're talented, so don't pout like a child over your loss, okay? He says, turning to face Katsuki. The blonde grunts a little and sighs, yeah, whatever. Eraserhead turns to face Izuku, then says, and Midoriya. The one for all user gasped uneasily, I see the only way you won the match was by messing up your arm again. Prior to Aizawa telling him to work harder, Midoriya lowered his head in shame and Asui put her hand on his shoulder to comfort him. Additionally, don't use the excuse that you can't continue to break your body training here because you don't have control over your quirk or that your lines are already getting old. But if you can manage your quirk, it will be very helpful. Izuku and Tsuyu both grinned as their teacher turned to face the class and said, all right, let's get down to business, our first task will decide your future. The entire class simultaneously gasped in terror and wondered, is this another quirk test? With a collective sigh of relief, the students all said, you all need to pick a class representative. Oh, good, just normal school stuff. Kirishima then called out, raising his hand, pick me, guys, class rep is what I want to be. Izuku and Asui observed as nearly everyone yelled to be the class representative. Kaminari also raised his hand with a broad smile, saying, I'll take it. Jiro raised her hand to tell him, yeah, you're gonna need me. Asui. She turned to look at her boyfriend. Ribbit? She gasps and blushes slightly as he says, smiling, you should be class representative? Our Ribbit? She smiled and said, oh no, Deku, I shouldn't, but you should. You would look cute leading the class. Izuku's face was nearly strawberry colored as she tapped her finger on her cheek, but fortunately no one heard them because they were arguing over who should be the class representative. Iida yelled abruptly, everyone, please keep quiet, please. On cue, everyone halted and turned to face the inflexible teenager who clarifies. The class representative's responsibility is to guide others. That is not something that can be done by anyone. The most sensible method to fill this role is democratically, since you must first earn the trust of every student in the classroom. To select our leader, an election will be held. It's pretty obvious you want us to vote for you, they all said, with Asui continuing to tap her cheek. We have only known each other for a few days, how do we know who we can trust? Tenya was seen holding his hand up, just like the majority of them had just a short while ago. She turns to face the astonished Izuku. I'll vote for you. He whispered, causing his girlfriend to croak with a rosy face. Then I'll vote for you. She responded with a giggle, teasing each other as everyone began voting, including the 2 seconds after. He knows she only said that because they can only tell friends about their relationship. A few minutes later following the voting, the names of some of the voters were displayed on the board in front of the classroom, revealing the results of the election of the class representative. Tsuyu Asui received 1 vote, along with a few others. Momo Yaoyorozu received 2 votes, and Izuku Midoriya received 4 votes, which shocked and surprised everyone, including Midoriya, who asked, how did I receive 4 votes? Bakugo stood up and yelled angrily, slamming his hands on his desk and saying, all right, you fools, come clean. Who cast a ballot for him? Before anyone else could say anything, Sue said, I did. As she went on, everyone turned to watch her. I voted for Midoriya, Ribbit. She grinned at Izuku, causing him to smile back. Thank you. Anyway, before Kaminari addressed him with a faint laugh, Kachan yelled, what, you thought we were going to vote for you? He turned to face the Denki and yelled, what was that? Do you want to go? As this continued, Iida began to tremble with disappointment. 0 votes. He said, drawing the attention of Tsuyu and Izuku alike. I can't argue with the system I choose, but I'm afraid this might happen. As he keeps suppressing his annoyance, he says, so you cast your ballot for someone else? In response to Momo's question, Rikido Sato said, yeah, what are you trying to get at Iida? Following this, Momo was standing directly beside Izuku as he stood in front of the class, trembling with anxiety. All right, the class rep is Izuku Midoriya, and our deputy is Yaoyorozu. Aizawa said from his yellow-orange sleeping bag before he collapsed onto solid ground and went to sleep. Really? It's not an error, is it? Midoriya asked, shaking nervously, but he noticed Sue showing him her notebook she held up from her desk discreetly from the class that said as wrote, "Relax honey, no reason to be nervous." She then gives him a wink, which makes Midoriya smile. He sighs and calms down until he hears Momo sigh, at which point he asks himself or himself, how did this happen? Causing Izuku to feel anxious once more. Cafeteria UA. Why is this place always so packed? As she and Iida sat with Midoriya and Asui, who were both near to one another and were rubbing their legs against one another under the table out of sight of everyone in the spacious room, Uraraka posed the question. In response to Ochako's question, Iida explained, that's because students in the support, management, and hero courses all share the same cafeteria with us. As they were eating, Izuku, who was enjoying his favorite dish, noticed Asui eating hers. He grinned, thinking it was adorable, but Ochako interrupted him by saying, this rice is delicious." With a sigh, she continued to chew with Izuku, causing Tsuyu to look concerned. "Are you okay?" "Why yeah, it's just. I'm kinda worried about the class representative thing," he replied smilingly when she asked him. "I don't think I'm qualified." He looked a little dejected until he felt a big hand on his regular hand and turned to face his girlfriend, who smiled back at him. "Sure you are Midoriya." His melancholy vanished before Iida spoke. "You'll be great." Uraraka, Asui, and Midoriya gaze at him. As Iida goes on, Izuku hummed, "Not to mention the strength you've demonstrated. Your courage and quick thinking under stress, it'll help make you a worthy leader. I voted for you, at least, for those reasons." The trio let out a startled gasp. "You were among the four? You were one, but Sue voted for me, right?" As Ochako glances at Tenya, Izuku inquired, "Didn't you really want to be representative?" Asui puts a finger to her cheek and says, "That's not exactly how we should be choosing our representative." She smiles, "I mean, you do look the part because of the glasses." Tenya tells them after he drinks his juice, wanting a job and being suited to it are two different things. "I've learned a lot from watching my family's hero agency." When he was done, the three of them gave him an interested look. A hero agency. Tenya gasped when she realized what he had said as they both asked at the same moment, "Wait, what does your family do?" Asui ate a piece of her favorite jelly before telling him, "I've been wondering something about you." Izuku asked inquisitively, making Iida anxious as he attempted to brush it off. Oh, it's nothing." He lied to them in the hopes that they would change the topic. "Is your family well off?" Ochako smiled and told him, "Admit it, Iida," and he looked shocked. "You're wealthy." The three leaned curiously toward Iida, who sighed in defeat before explaining. "I was afraid people would treat me differently if they knew about my family," he said, gasping and then turning away. As the three gasped, he grinned and said, "You see, the Iidas have been pro-heroes for generations. It runs in our blood." "What? That's fantastic. Are all three of you familiar with the turbo hero Ingenium?" Iida asked after they all yelled at once. Izuku let out a gasp. "I am fully aware of him. He's a highly popular pro with almost more than 70 sidekicks working along with him at his Tokoyo agency." Asui heard Izuku ask Iida in realization, "Wait a minute, is Ingenium?" and giggled, finding it adorable that he explains a pro-hero, knowing that he knows a lot of heroes because she had secretly read his hero information book once while he was in the shower. "My older brother is him." Iida shocked them by confirming with honor, "Your family is well known." Ochako exclaimed joyfully, "It's unbelievable." Izuku exclaimed smiling widely, "Ribbit." Tsuyu grinned and nodded as she croaked. Ingenium is an unmasked commander who upholds the hero code, Iida then explains to them. He closes his eyes and continues, "As the second oldest son of the Iida family, I try to be just like him. However, I think it might be a bit too soon for me to be in a real leadership role." He smiles at Midoriya and says, "You for example. In the practical exam, you were able to determine what the judges were looking for. Iida wants to be like his brother in the same way I want to be like All Might." Izuku thought, grinning, but his thoughts were interrupted when he turned to see Asui grievingly staring down at her plate. He worriedly held her hand beneath the table to get her attention. "Are you okay?" he asked, and she nodded. "Yeah, I'm okay. It's just the entrance exam. She says, looking him in the eyes. "I remember seeing you." She pauses, almost crying, but tries not to until she feels Izuku squeeze her hand, then looks up at him. "I know, but don't worry, I'll work hard to improve my quirk so I won't break my bones anymore," he said with a smile. He whispered, "I promise." "For you." Sue grinned and rubbed her smooth leg against his in private as Midoriya recalled something. The three of them turned to face him and said, Oh, hey Ida. Yeah, about the practical exam. He was interrupted by the sound of the school bell, which startled everyone and even caused Sue to croak. What is that? Before receiving his response over the intercom, Deku asked in shock. Caution. Level 3 security vulnerability, please leave the building. All students. Ida looks at the student seated in a booth next to the four of them, unsure of what a level 3 security breach is. What is a level 3 security breach? It means that someone managed to get past the school barriers, he said to the student who responded. In my 3 years here, this has never occurred. We must go. Subsequently, the student stood up and fled, with the others trailing behind. Ida led the way, followed by Uraraka, while Sue held Deku's arm and pulled him along with her. To her surprise, however, he stayed seated, leaving her perplexed. Midoriya Konan, we must. She halted, sensing that something was amiss. She could see that he was staring at his food while trembling with fear and rage, which caused his power to glow and surge through his body. Deku? Ribbit. She then gasps in shock. In a flash, Izuku stood up, causing a bit of wind to flow around them. He looks at her with a serious expression, shocking her. Deku? Asui inquired anxiously.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.